No.
No. No. No. No.
It was like
Jesus. No. 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 Ah.
30 seconds.
Where the fuck did you come from?
Shoot him! Stop reloading! Run!
No! No! Fucking hell! Oh! Oh!
No.
Hello.
Oh!
Oh, you dickhead!
That's another death for Fairy. Hello, everybody. It's podcast day. I know, not
Podcast.
Tuesday. It's our special
Special
Sunday
podcast.
pod. A special Sunday
podcast.
pod, just for you special people on the.
And we have,
special
of course, agreed to stay live for 24 hours in practice.
Yeah. So this is our test 24-hour podcast.
The gimmick this time is because it would be quite hard for us to stay awake and work tomorrow. Is we're gonna keep recording, we're gonna keep streaming, but you and I are gonna go to bed.
Yeah, we're not actually.
And when we wake
here,
up, we're gonna work, but without cutting out the recording or
Yeah.
the streaming.
Yeah, well, I'm going into the office tomorrow, so I won't even be here. It'll just be a view of the back wall and nothing else.
But it'll still be a 24-hour stream of your back wall, so that's what's important.
I don't have COVID, pals.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So just before we went, the week before we went on holiday, and the reason why this has been delayed is that I got ill, and I was like, "God, both Laura and I had this horrible cold," but we tested and it wasn't COVID. And then the day before we went on holiday, Barry was like, "Hey guys, I tested positive for COVID," and we were like, "Oh, I guess maybe we had COVID." But yeah. Hello, people who may or may not have been alive the past 24 hours. I am alive. I have come to be born.
I only exist the moment Jamie invites me to the stream.
Yeah.
And then I go back into an unconscious, what is it, the sock puppet inside,
Yeah.
It's like a never-ending state of sleep paralysis.
The 24-hour podcast for you is going to be terrifying. It's going to be the longest you've ever been active.
The most I've ever been alive, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to it. Should we get on with this podcast?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
And we're rusty, and it's Sunday.
My Ant-Man review ended up being quite long.
Yeah, I was enjoying the live feed as you typed it.
Yeah. But don't read it too much. I think you'll enjoy it when I do it.
Yeah, no. I've tried not to read it top to bottom, but yeah.
Okay.
I saw you chipping away at it.
I haven't come up with a TT.
Yeah, you're gonna come up with a TT, brother. In fact, let me move all my windows around because I need to have my notes.
New cat review. New cat review.
Notes.
Aurora is wonderful. She's very spicy. She wanted dinner, and she wanted dinner so much that she kept attacking me, which made me not give her dinner. Oh, she just hopped into the room. She just heard me talking about her.
Are you chatting shit? Are you chatting shit in here? Yeah, then she comes.
Literally, there was like a thud, and she was like,
yeah, because you say Aurora, and she's like, what?
You chatting shit.
What? Are you gonna feed me? Are you gonna feed me? Are you gonna feed me?
I still have a little bit of a cough, so I will try and if I cough, stop and give us a good point to edit. But yeah.
I did that cough on purpose because I don't want you to feel like you alone are coughing in the podcast.
Sylvie and Maddie want me to feed them. We'll play some Plate Up at some point. You can just play the customers. Right.
TT? You got a TT?
Yeah, sure. Why not? You ready?
Oh, that sounds very half committal. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna like it.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do a podcast.
I know you said the claps don't matter. Oh no, we're not ready. You have to do a sync count.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. We're rusty, and I've put other things in the place where my card is, but it's still here. It's fine.
Good.
Okay, we're gonna do 3, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You happy with that?
I'm happy with that. Yeah.
It's gonna be Wait for this car to go. But I've got loads of like wet traffic outside. But if I don't open
Yeah.
the window, I roast.
The
So
traffic's the wettest.
the wettest. Right. 3, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Smashing.
Now we can start the podcast.
Okay, cool. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's episode of the Bunyip Review. I am your co-host, James the Bunyip Man Willis, and I am here with my co-host, Jonas Tiny Tarantula Garway. How you doing, Jonas?
My 8 legs are tiny, so tiny, tiny is my little body.
But your
Please don't crush
spirit's
me.
huge.
I'm as furry as a normal tarantula, but inside all that fur, I'm just a tiny tarantula.
You're as furry as a normal tarantula.
Yes.
Well, are you suggesting that you're the size of a normal tarantula, but that's all fur, and then inside is a tiny little nubbin of
like
a tarantula?
normal tarantula is like 10% fur, 90% body. I'm 90% fur, 10% body. I'm surprised you can hear me through all the fur.
It works like one of those fuzzy things that goes on microphones. It actually sounds a lot better. It keeps the wind out. There's no sort of whooshing sound. It's really good.
I'll be honest, people have been a lot less terrified me since they've sort of identified me as a big ball of harmless fur. But little do they know, I'm still the terrifying arachnid inside.
You're actually the most venomous spider in the entire world.
I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Just
actually,
get on in here and I'll heckin' murder you.
I got the words wrong. Sorry. The most toxic spider. You're famously right wing, a member of the alt-right. You're a dreadful online troll.
Oh my God, yes. No, if you approach me, the things I'll say about your body composition and your relationship to masculinity and or femininity, oh, they're horrible. They're horrible.
Well, I think you'll be a perfect fit for this podcast. So let's get started then, shall we? We'll start off with the rewind section. I don't know how long tarantulas live for, but I'm assuming you've been around long enough to know what Death Stranding is.
Oh, I'm gonna get replaced by this human being that's picking me up and throwing me out the window at a high velocity. Ah! All right, Jamie, let's talk. Sorry, we gonna do the rewind section?
I think it bounced. I think all the fluff just saved it, and it's totally fine. That's amazing.
I didn't appreciate that this weird ball of fur was on the top of my microphone, like one of those like the little kind of like socks that you put on your microphones as like sound dampeners. I didn't appreciate that because I don't use one of those right now, so I just threw it out the window.
Sorry.
Now, if you wouldn't mind getting distracted
moment.
by a cat.
I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't climb out the window.
Well, it certainly looks like she's gonna try, but I see. This is the rewind section, or it's the Aurora Cat Watch section where we try.
If this makes it into the audio podcast for audio listeners, my cat just wandered across the table, did a faint meow, which you might have heard, and then she climbed up against the window, and the window's slightly ajar, and she thinks that might mean she could make a break for freedom.
I see. Well, I mean, for one, this is definitely staying in the audio version because the less editing I have to do, the better. And this doesn't feel like an egregious interruption to the viewer experience. In fact, I think the listener enjoys a little bit of secondhand cat noise.
Yeah,
cat viewing.
well, if you're an audio listener and you want to know what's going on, we post the videos on YouTube. I think it's called the Bunyip it's called like I don't know. You'll find it.
But Bunyip
Just
Gaming?
Bunyip Gaming or something like that on YouTube. I don't even know.
Just search the Bunyip Review.
If you watch usually the first Tuesday of every month, although not this month or next month, because both of those days will be changing, so you'll find out. You can see a cat trying to escape a house up in the.
We're the most consistently inconsistent podcast on the network.
Bunyip
Honestly.
VODs apparently is the channel you want. Thank you very
VODs.
much, Steltech in chat. Okay, so Death Stranding. So I played Death Stranding, and I'd forgotten you'd reviewed it many moons ago, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll review it, and then you said you won't. So I actually put it to the side, but I've played a few hours of it. I can tell you now actually how many hours I've played of it. I've played 9 hours of it, so not very much. And it's looking like it might be a long game if I do go back to it. I'm enjoying it. It's interesting. I talk a lot on this podcast about there's like a phenomenon in Japanese games and sometimes Japanese media of this sort of in media res thing of they drop you into like they drop you into it and they don't explain very much and they use a lot of terms like really quickly and it's often hard to know what's worth listening to and what you need to know and what you don't need to know. And this does that, but I don't know, it does it in a nicely cinematic enough way that it was quite an enjoyable ride, even if I didn't understand what was going on for maybe the first 2 or 3 hours. Um, but I quite enjoyed the bit I played of it. There was definitely the actual sort of mechanical gameplay of it was quite chill, quite relaxing. And actually, in fact, anytime I got attacked by mules or BTs, I was kind of like, can we get this over with so that I can get back to the sort of hiking over mountains part of it, putting down ladders and things like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Jonas, you played it a long time ago. Is this stirring anything in you talking about it?
Death Stranding is a game that I wish I made the time to sit down and finish. Um, it's, I mean, for one, it is as a video game, like it is genuinely quite phenomenal in that it is huge in its scope. In your first 9 hours, you probably started the game in like a single kind of slightly smaller staging area where, your deliveries can't go much further than like a forest that is like a 20 minutes walk away or a hub that's like 30 minutes walk away, that sort of thing. But as the game opens out, it asks you to start building infrastructure that other people online can use. So like bridges and roads and like zip lines that you can like attach yourself to, and like you can zip like across the world if you build enough zip lines. The vehicles like become a really important part to how you transport like huge amounts of materials across the world, because for you to build a bridge somewhere else, you need to bring it like loads of metal and like ceramics and stone and stuff like that. And you just find so many different ways to like problem solve navigational issues, whether it's climbing a mountain in the rain, whether it's going down a deep slope, or whether it's crossing a body of water. A lot of the delight in that game, yeah, is kind of being like this kind of like problem solving hiker. Like, you're like, and everyone kind of called it like the Deliveroo simulator, because Hideo Kojima predicting the future all the time, right? What he did with this game was he predicted a world where no one was willing to go outside, and everyone's ability to survive hinged on the few crucial workers who were willing to go outside, who were willing to see other people and had to wear like suits and masks and hazmat suits to like navigate the world and bring your goods to your front door, because you as a civilian will not go outside because that's deadly. And so it was like, oh my god, it's just like COVID.
It's funny, like I remember when it first came out and people talked about this theming, and it felt quite on the nose because it had the whole like system, and it was like, oh, it's it's a satire of the fact that people aren't really connected these days, and that it's all about social media and how people really they need in-person connections to survive and all this kind of stuff. And now it's post-COVID. No one even I didn't even think about that when I was playing it. It was the only thing that brought me back to that kind of feeling about it was the fact that things were called likes, and like the weird stuff about how like people had sort of like neurodegenerative diseases if they didn't get enough likes and things like that. But outside of that, it really felt like a game about COVID that was made before COVID, which was it was so strange. It was like it didn't hit me until quite a way in where I was like, oh, this was a pre-COVID game.
I think Hideo, like, I can't give you the fixed examples, but my understanding is people think this about Hideo Kojima quite a lot. Like, some of the themes he wrote about in Metal Gear Solid, I think, ended up kind of becoming like prophecies in and of themselves, in the same way that we look at The Simpsons and we're like, that's a show that predicted the future 20 times. I think Hideo's like done it more than once, which is enough for it to be relevant. But that game's like, it's kind of weird, right? Like, because you're playing like Norman Reedus, Hollywood actor Norman Reedus, and at some point you're going to meet like Mads Mikkelsen, Hollywood actor Mads Mikkelsen,
I've
and you're
seen
going to
him. I've
sit
seen him in
down.
the flashbacks. Yeah.
Sure. And you're going to sit down underground and put your little like weird test tube baby pod on the wall, and you're going to sit on a bed and stare at a can of Red Bull, and then
You
you're going
don't
to,
anymore. They
oh
removed
sorry,
it.
Monster.
No, it's all been removed.
So
So
it's
there's
not.
There's no ads in it at all now. It's like a weird sort of in-universe can.
What is going on? What
Mm.
what happened to my Monster Energy?
There was a big update apparently before I started playing it. So I got to the point where you shower and you drink the cans of energy drink. And I remember when it first came out, the adverts coming across and being like, why is it advertising a fucking Norman Reedus show
Yeah, the
like in the
ride or
middle of a
something.
game
Yeah.
where everyone's dead? Like and it doesn't do that anymore. It didn't do that on my game. It's just cans of this weird in-universe energy drink.
Oh my god, that's so weird. It does a lot of weird things, right? Like you shower and then you get given a grenade and it's made of your sweat.
Yeah.
And if you use the toilet, you get a grenade made of your pee or poop because you are like the ghosts don't like your body fluids specifically. So if you throw your body fluids at the ghosts, they get a bit sad and like you have more defense. And then like the navigation in that game, it's like, if it rains, all your boxes start decaying and you need to like climb through a forest or a city ruins while it's raining, while these weird ghosts try and like hunt you down. So I'm getting very angry at the traffic outside my window, but I am going to push on. It's just like it's a bafflingly weird objective for your character to fulfill, and the things that they put in your way are quite like unique and different to a lot of other games.
What I really like about a lot of it is it's a sci-fi game that feels really about the physical and the real. Like it's set in a future universe and it's like, it's set in a post-apocalyptic kind of thing, but it's not about lasers. It's not really even about robots or anything like that. It's about like, climbing a mountain, your balance on the ground, that things like rain damage you rather than like you rarely actually you do get in a bit of combat, but that's not really the real risk. The risk is the environment and the way that you physically traverse the environment. And it's rare that you have a game that's so centrally about the person and the body and the human. And that even comes down to, like you say, the weirder bits, right? Like using your pee and your sweat to ward off monsters, right? It's all about the human and the body and the person. And I think this is what for me takes this the made me stick with this and follow this quite convoluted plot and this quite sort of in media res kind of thing that I don't normally stick with in other games of this kind of thing. It made me stick with it is because it really felt like there was a lot of thought into everything. Everything was sort of woven and it had that auteur sort of artistic feel to it, which Hideo Kojima's known for. And I didn't play much Metal Gear Solid. I played a little bit of the first one. I can see why people like him. It's pretty good.
Yeah, the stuff that people laugh about is obviously like he overtly names his character Sam Bridges, and then you're building bridges between
Yeah.
people in America, and like he'll name his character like Heartman, and Heartman
Yeah.
like his heart needs
Die
restarting.
Hardman is one of the
Die
characters.
Hard Man, his favorite
Yeah.
film is Die Hard, and it's like Hideo kind of likes like that slap in your face obviousness about like a lot of things, but then tries to write things like 5 layers deep. But sometimes it's like memeable how he does that and how
But
he
I think that's part of its charm, right? Is that the things that don't necessarily matter that much, he has fun with, right? Like
yeah
it doesn't matter that this guy's called Die Hardman. That's really stupid,
yeah
but it didn't change my experience of it. He was still like he didn't act wacky. He was just a dude called Die Hardman.
yeah
And then I just got on with the game kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, like if like if there'd been more wacky things in the environment, if he'd sort of had fun with like graffiti on the walls and things, or like the way that Sam would go whoa 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 when he fell over or something, that would that would really take you out of it. But he knows where those points are to do something stupid, and it kind of works.
yeah and do you know they're making a sequel to this game as well?
I heard this. I was talking to a friend about playing it, and they said, "Oh, do you know there's a sequel?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah. No, we got a cinematic trailer about a year ago now, or late last year, that
Mm.
confirmed a trailer, and we've just had pictures of Hollywood actor Nicolas Cage hanging out with
Oh
Hideo
my
Kojima.
god. Oh my
So
god, yes.
it's quite likely that Nick Cage is going to be a character in the next game
Maybe the main
because
character.
Hideo Kojima kind of insists on getting any Hollywood actor he can meet into his projects because he is such a fanboy for American cinema that it kind of influences like everything he does.
And it kind of works. Mads
I mean, yeah.
Mikkelsen is really good, and in the little flashback scenes I've seen of him, he was really good. Norman Reedus is really good, and I believed him. I believed he didn't really want to rebuild America.
Yeah, they're literally like Hideo Kojima, for all his meme abilities and for all his just like absolute slap in your face kind of like silliness about like American Japanese culture crossovers and the metaphors he tries to build. In the end, he is like artistic. He loves artistic expression. He loves like he always wanted to be a director and now he makes games. He just wants to make games that feel like the movies he wants people to watch, for better or worse. But yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it. And I think there is a lot to love about that game. Once you, annoyingly, that first area, that tutorial area, quote unquote, it is like 10 hours to 12 hours long.
Right, so
And
I'm at the cusp of it. That's what I felt
yeah,
basically. I was about to get to the bit where my next delivery was to a place where I'd have to cross a lake.
across a lake. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, that sounds about right. You cross a lake, and then I think you start in a new map, and that new map is the main map. It is the massive, massive main map that it wants you to like get in a vehicle and drive on roads.
Right, so
And once
I should basically power through if I want to carry on playing.
yeah, and it's like once you do that for like 4 hours, you're like, oh, this is the game.
Right.
Like everything was preparing me for this bit of the game, which is a bit ridiculous because it's asking you for a really big investment. But anyways, yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm glad I'm rethinking about it. They did release a director's cut, and I've been meaning for a long time to sit and play that, and I just haven't. And I hope that that gets resolved at some point.
Well, maybe now is your opportunity, and then we can talk about it again for a third time, and then maybe a fourth time when I finish it, and then we'll talk about the sequel. All right, we're going to move on to our first section of the podcast, and as always, it's television, but this month I'm up first, and I'm talking about The Office. So I tactfully only put The Office rather than the particular brand of Office that I was going to talk about. But basically, I've been watching through the American Office again, and I thought, apart from the fact that I haven't watched much else fully yet, there are things I do want to review, but I'm not there yet. It's also interesting as sort of a case study of adaptation and adaptations that do actually work, and why they work. So I've been watching the American version. It's a sitcom set in a paper company. In the case of the American one, it's called Dunder Mifflin. And it's based on this British version of the TV show, but very quickly becomes quite different. The original British version of the show is sort of thematically about the brutal mundanity of office life. So it focuses on what sort of strange corporate incentives and the soul-sucking repetitiveness of these kind of environments does to people. It's all about the malaise of everyday capitalism and how small amounts of power can corrupt absolutely. If you look at like David Brent is a character who takes the tiniest amounts of power and it entirely ruins him as a person. The American version shares some of these themes and basically directly recreates the first season in its first season. But quickly, though, it begins to diverge and the two shows take on very different tones and meanings. While both David Brent, the boss in the original British version, and Michael Scott, the boss in the American version, are selfish and petty a lot of the time, the American Office, they change the character a bit as the show goes on to give Scott a bit more of a heart to him. And this creates a warmth to the show that bleeds into the rest of everything else, shifting it to a story about camaraderie even during the drudgery of modern life. It's not just the petty grievances of people who are required to spend time with their boss, but now a family who've reluctantly come to love each other. The American Office's twist on the format is a welcome one. It's gently absurd while still having a grounding in relatable modern office life. It has a joy and energy to it which makes for very easy watching, and it genuinely takes care in its characters. The British Office was an uncomfortable satire. It was funny in the way that it laid bare how bleak modern life had become for some people. And when it came out, many people didn't even realise it wasn't real. that could never be said about the American Office, even if there hadn't been a pre-existing cultural knowledge of it. But both shows, I think, exemplify their core cultural canon when it comes to the ideas of everyday work and life. Britain finds humour in the dark parts and the mundane parts, and America finds it in optimism and individualism despite the darkness. The American Office is an enjoyable and easy to watch sitcom and an excellent adaptation. It takes what works from its predecessor and it changes what works for the culture it's adapting it into to create something that's greater than its parts. Jonas, have you watched any of The Office? Are you a fan?
I don't think I've seen an episode of The Office from start to finish. I've seen many clips of The Office. I've
The
seen many
American or
references.
British or
Both.
ah?
I've seen many references. I know a lot of like single image or 2-panel image memes from The Office, mostly the American one. I don't really want to watch the English one because I don't like Ricky Gervais at a biological level. I just find he perturbs me.
Well, so
So
the thing I'll say here, and I've said this to many people, because the response I usually get when I say I like the British Office is I hate Ricky Gervais, and my answer to that is I do too. But if Ricky Gervais does one thing well, it's arsehole characters and the sort of the pettiness and arseholiness that is inherent in certain people. And so, yeah, I really don't like Ricky Gervais. I don't like him as a person. But that's exactly the point. You're not supposed to like his character in that show. And in fact, you actively shouldn't. He is a bad person. He is a selfish, petty person who's been given a small amount of power, and that sort of goes to his head and kind of poisons all of his interactions with everyone else. And I think that that can only really come in the quality that he's created it. It's that in extras can only really come from the kind of person who is actually like that in real life.
yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that at all, right? Like if Ricky Gervais ends up being in a piece of media and that piece of media is great and he just happens to be in it, then I will just watch it, right?
Yeah.
But it is certainly like where I certainly haven't set out the time to watch this show in either of its formats already. That's just yet another thing I think about when I think about like the fact
Yeah.
that I could watch it.
No, fair enough.
I think I really want to watch The American Office though. I think like it's the kind of show that I know I would enjoy. I know that it's got that kind of like, I mean, I'm assuming it's finished now, but it's got like a huge amount of like
Yeah, long time,
legacy,
yeah.
legacy and influence to it. And it's such an easy show to point to when you kind of want to like relate a lot of like, just modern living and like, a lot of us now, like we're in our 30s, we've worked full-time jobs, we've worked 9 to 5s, we've been in office environments. We can now like take a lot of those kind of like idiosyncrasies of our everyday working lives. The Office feels like it reflects it in like a comedic way or highlights that, that daily interaction you have with the person who's at the front desk who probably knows more about you than you'd like. And, that interaction with someone who sits behind you who, maybe they saw something they shouldn't. But you both know that it's like bad behavior to kind of escalate that to a boss. So you just don't, but you both know, and you kind of have to like move forward with your lives, like that kind of stuff, right? And it's just stuff like, yeah, colleagues are not your friends, but they're more than just colleagues eventually, right? And it's about like reconciling the two.
I think the American one, they both have very different feels to them. While the British one is a comedy, it definitely feels more like it's definitely a black comedy, and it's definitely, people do form friendships and relationships throughout the show, but they're kind of fractured and weird and often like unsatisfying and things like that. There is one central satisfying relationship, but outside of that there's not many. The American one is very much like, it is very much a sitcom in in the world of work. So it is sort of light-hearted looks at all the things you're saying, right? And I think that makes the British one uncomfortable for exactly the reasons it wants to be, and it makes the American one really relatable for exactly the reasons it wants to be. And the American one is just really easy watching. There's a reason why there's so many episodes, other than just it's an American show and all American shows get hundreds of episodes. But it is just that they've got the right mix of all the different characters and the right mix of relatability that you can just sort of, chill out and barely pay attention, and you get nice sort of funny moments.
How does it? I think you've reviewed Arrested Development on this show,
Right,
or
yeah.
or was it Parks and Recs? Maybe both.
Maybe
But
both. I can
but
have a
they
look.
are a trio. They are a trio of quite well celebrated American sitcom actors who you will recognize, who have gone on to bigger things,
Mm.
like comfortable staples of American sitcom history, right? And so I guess what I'm sort of wondering, having never watched any of these three shows to completion, is just, does The Office feel like it is a third different option to those two, Arrested Development and Parks and Recs? Does it feel like it's actually closer to one of those two than
It's
not?
it's definitely closer to Parks and Rec. Arrested Development has part of that feel of a British show where everyone is a some kind of you know generally bad person or has like major flaws, and the humor is in them, is in them being clowns, or in them having failures, or in this idea that sort of like there are no heroes, and it's kind of relatable or funny to laugh at people who are bad, and funny to laugh at people who sort of fail helplessly kind of thing.
Hmm.
both um both Parks and Rec, but Parks and Rec is very much sort of the American vein of like, you know, everyone's a good person, everyone's trying really hard, and the humor is in that, they finally overcome the thing that they really needed to overcome, and that actually, underneath it all, we're all good friends, and it's all really good, isn't it, kind of thing. The American Office tries to be a lot like the British one. Michael
Sure.
Scott is a quite sort of, he's quite racist in certain ways. He's quite sort of uncomfortable about certain things. He's quite sexist and all this stuff. And then they slowly start to strip all that out of him, and he starts to become instead a sort of like lovable clown who is selfish, but he also really does care about other people. He just wants them to care about him as well. And it starts to move away from the Arrested Development thing where no one is redeemable, everyone is horrible, and it's all about this sort of horrible place where everyone is forced to be together. It starts to slowly move towards that Parks and Rec thing of, towards the end of The Office, everyone is generally good friends, and everyone is generally a nice, you have something to like about everyone. I don't think you can say that about all characters in the British Office.
And the British Office, do you know the sort of off your top of your head? How many seasons is British Office, and like how many episodes is American
It was only
Office? Because
the British one was only like two short seasons or something, I
I got
think.
the sense that the British one did not find the momentum to carry on
So no,
where
the British one ends intentionally. It has a very
right,
specific ending that so it had 3 seasons, and then it ended. But
and
it's
the building explodes and they all die, and yeah, okay, cool.
exactly, yeah.
Nice.
So it has, oh no, it has 2 seasons and then a Christmas special. And
Right, like
basically,
Green Wing.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny because the second season of the British one basically ends with a quite big plot point that sort of rounds it up,
Sure.
which is also a massive plot point in the American one, but they both go different ways on
Okay.
that plot point. And then the American one ends up running for, let's see, the American one ends up running for 9 seasons at 23 episodes a season.
Okay.
The British one has 2 seasons
Huge amount.
at
Yeah.
2 seasons at what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes a season. So it's 12, well, 14 episodes of the British one.
That is genuinely a reason why I like so readily jump to watch a British version of something more than anything else, is like brevity. Oh, a complete narrative in 6 episodes. Yes. But yeah, it sounds like the American Office certainly like doesn't waste the amount of time it's been given. Like it sounds, You know, the sheer number of references and clips I've seen from that show shows that it's like it is well populated with good content.
It's well
And
worth watching.
yeah, I hope to eventually get round to watch this, and eventually it will be a rewind.
Smashing.
But yeah,
You've got
I
something to
got to
say
do the
to
bit,
me.
haven't I? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, like,
Should
where?
a big
How do we
smile
normally
on your face that was like,
How do we?
"You gonna move on?" No.
I'm all done. Okay, James, you are the boss of an office. You have power over people. Now, you're not a great person. You've got some problems, you know? You've got a long way to go until you're liked around the office, but don't worry. Don't worry. There's one thing that you can do. There's one thing you can do to make sure that you feel validated and that everyone recognizes your contributions to this great working place. You actually heard about this from a branch of the office that cut this in a different country. They were doing almost the exact same thing as you, actually. And they wanted a one-line review of this British show called The Office. And apparently, when the office got that, when the boss got that one-line review, everyone fell in love with the boss. They loved him. So you're thinking, maybe I can do the same thing, but we need to go our own way with this. I'm going to ask all my staff for a one-line summary of The Office, but the American version, featuring Steve Carell, whose name I almost forgot. And so you go around the office and you ask multiple people, and they all tell you their answer in confidence. And then, having gained all that information, you sit everyone down in a mandatory short notice meeting to discuss the future of this company. And the first thing you reveal is the one-line summary of the American version of The Office. What does the whiteboard say?
An easy watching comedy about the hells of capitalism.
And the camera zooms in on you, and you smile awkwardly at the camera. And you're like, I did it. And then it turns to the audience, and they hesitantly clap. Credits.
Smashing. Well, that's my audition tape for the next office. Just a side note, and I won't go very far with this. I saw a thing the other day that posted all the core characters from all the different country versions of The Office. So there's like a German one and a Polish one and all these things.
Sure.
And it sort of feels like, like a Shakespeare play or like some of those epic myths where the characters are always the same, but like they've changed from culture to culture kind of thing, and so the meaning of the play is quite different depending on the version of it you hear, but there's always like a jester and a king and those kind of things. It
Sure.
just, I don't know, it just felt like the modern version of that. Like, there's always a Jim and a Pam.
I never occurred to me that you get these shows, right, where several countries, like I get it when like one or two countries do their own version, like, you know, America hears that India did something, so they do an American version. They hear that Japan did something, so they do an American version. That happens a lot. But yeah, the concept that many countries all do their version of The Office kind of like tickles me, just because we watched Kidding, where there's like several versions of the character Mr. Pickles, and you get to meet all the versions of Mr. Pickles in different countries.
So The Office has a version in obviously the US and the UK. There is a Swedish one called Contoret, a Saudi Arabian one called Al Maktab, a Polish one called The Office, Israeli, Indian. There's going to be a Greek one, German, French, Finnish, Czech Republic, Chile, Canada, and Australia.
Okay.
There you go.
Imagine being the person who watches all of those and also educates themselves on the country's working peculiarities so that not a single joke goes over their head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the international office expert.
Yeah.
That'd be a
maybe
fun accolade to die with.
after I've watched all of the high and low films, then I'll start on
Then
all the
we'll get on
various
that,
versions
yeah.
of The Office. All right, we're going to move on to Jonas's TV show of the month. Jonas, what are you reviewing this month?
I'm going to close my window.
All right, well, there we go then. Maddie, why did you quit? I'd be a great boss. I'd be an excellent boss.
There's like a nice little piano bar opposite my window over there. And the problem is like right now there are just people fucking. I don't know if they've been to like
There's people
fucking water
fucking
spoons. There's
just
people.
outside the piano
There's
bar.
also a water spoons, water stones,
Water
what are they
There's
called?
water
Weatherspoons.
stones.
Weatherspoons.
There's water stones around the side.
There's
And
fucking
everyone's really
drunken
fucking
water
rowdy at the
stone
water
bastards.
stones.
There's people out there being loud and rowdy and shouting,
Turning
and
the
all the
pages really
traffic.
loudly.
It's just pissing me off. So I've closed the window. It's a shame because it's raining and it's nice and cool, and I'm really hot in here, so I do need the airflow. But
Well, maybe we can have regular breaks if you want.
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, this month, Jamie, I'm going to be reviewing a little television show called Eden. Bit of a content warning for this. It's a generally kind of a light, accessible show, but it is about like the end of human civilization, and there's some death, and there's definitely some grief in there. So if those are themes that you are cautious about, please do be aware about that before you go in. Eden, it's a short little 4-episode series on Netflix. It's not British, despite us saying something about that with English shows earlier. This is a story about it's about 2 robots who they're farming robots. They live in this, they're in this future utopia where there seem to be no humans, and then they find a baby in a little pod. The baby is called Sarah. Now they're programmed to believe that humans are dangerous and should be eliminated on sight, but they look at this human baby and they sort of do an assessment that this human baby is clearly not dangerous. Like they don't perceive weaponry, they don't perceive hostile intent, and so this conflicts with their instructions to eliminate humans. And so, unsure how to proceed, they ultimately end up like delaying a decision, and they just keep doing that until they are basically raising a child in secret. The 2 robots, A37, who is voiced by Rosaria Dawson, and E92, who is voiced by David Tennant, ultimately raise Sarah to be sort of a young teenager. Sarah, as a teenager, voiced by Ruby Rose Turner. And as Sarah grows up, she becomes curious about why there are no other humans and starts to search for clues as to humanity's whereabouts. Now, the story wouldn't be complete without some form of a threat or sort of an antagonist. And Eden gives us this robot leader called Zero, who is voiced by Neil Patrick Harris. Zero is a machine who seems to be enforcing the idea that humans are dangerous. And when there are hints that, a human is somewhere in the world, Zero starts to seek her out. And actually, part of the story is uncovering exactly who or what Zero is. Now, the plot isn't particularly original. It's not doing anything that we haven't seen before in that kind of sci-fi sphere. It's a very comfortable sci-fi premise explored in a short and to-the-point package, which makes Eden really quite delightful to watch. I think the core heart of this story is touching on the themes of the kind of the creator versus creation. These machines, they've been designed and instilled with very specific rules and logic that they have to follow. But as is evident with the protagonist robots, A37 and E92, there's room for interpretation there. And there's a certain, when they actually perceive something for the first time, they come to their own conclusions about that thing that completely defies the instructions that they've been given. Sort of results in differing behaviors between the robots. And there's also a large sort of grief plays a large part of the kind of emotional core of the story as we start to see glimpses of the events that preceded the disappearance of humanity. I think if you like taking familiar sci-fi concepts and you enjoy seeing how they play out in kind of like new variables, I think Eden will be a nice show for you, especially as it's kind of like led, by a young female protagonist. And it's just quite a beautifully kind of designed and presented show. Oh, and it's 3D animated and Japanese, so I guess it's an anime, but I thought I'd leave that till last. Jamie, have you seen Eden? Has it ever been advertised to you?
No, I just googled it now, and it looks cool. It sounds really cool as well. It sounds like a really nice plot, it sounds like the kind of thing that I would really enjoy. Is it particularly sort of action focused, or is it more sort of dialogue heavy? Is it sort of thinky, or is it sort of action motivated?
I think it's very dialogue heavy. There's little to no. There are like maybe two physical conflicts in it, and they're not like crazy to follow. They're not anime. This is 3D animated, and 3D animated is like, it is quite an interesting thing because anime is generally like very 2D, and that's how you get the good choreography, good cinematics. It tends to be kind of simplified like that. We are seeing more 3D animated stuff. I get the sense that this might have been a passion project by a studio that wanted to learn 3D, right? They wanted to get better and better at 3D. Maybe they had the passion to do some robot designs, some mech designs, like to do 3D sci-fi. So I'm wondering if this was like maybe a passion project that, like, by getting these 4 episodes out, they were able to like try that and still do it successfully and have it funded by Netflix.
It's
But
funny,
it's also
like the visuals of it that on Google do make it look very anime though.
hmm, it is. I mean, in the end, it is a Japanese art style,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
concept art and designs of characters are always going to be quite reminiscent of the area and the culture that they're from, I think. But yeah, it's definitely like it's a show that's more about the heart and the emotion, and certainly like the plot around one girl, more than it is about robot fighting and mechas and downfall of robots in a Terminator way. Like it's just not a conflict heavy story. It's quite light and it's quite emotional and it's very accessible is what I would say about it.
And how are the performances? I've not seen anything where David Tennant has had to do a voice for a character. Are they good? Are they enjoyable?
They're fun. The thing that you get out of this, right, is A37 and E92. They talk like robots. Um,
Right.
and
Does that get grating over the course of a whole show?
no, because they actually like evolve over time, right?
Right.
So to begin with, when they like express dialogue, they don't speak English. They speak like noises. And when
Right.
they encounter a baby, their human language module is unlocked, like it triggers.
Right.
And so they say human words for the first time, and they're saying like recharge rather than eat, and like sort of depleted battery rather than sleepy or tired.
Yeah.
And it's only after years of raising a human child that they like start to speak more naturally into like a flow and like conversation.
I quite like that
But
as an idea. Like, yeah.
But then interestingly, like, Sarah also grows up saying very robotic phrases for
Mm.
like yes, no, and I'll be back later and stuff like that. Like where you would expect a modern day human phrase, she speaks actually kind of like a robot because she's only been raised by robots. So there's a give and a take there. And what's really nice is, David Tennant and Rosario Dawson, like, doing the kind of whole like I have assessed a threat. Affirmative. What do you think? E92. I have assessed the same thing. And then half an episode later, they're like conversing with each other, but actually like they're having like kind of philosophical discussions, right? Like they're trying to understand what their place is in all this because they need a reason. They don't, that there has to be a reason for all this stuff. So narratively and performance wise, I think it's very satisfying. And just to be clear, like with this being Japanese produced, there is Japanese voice acting. But I got told about this with the name drop of the English voice actors, Neil Patrick
Yeah.
Harris, David Tennant, Rosario Dawson. So I thought, let's give the English one a go. And it's a great dub. There's only one character who can possibly lip sync badly. And because it's 3D animated, it's not like that was going to be perfect with any language.
Do you think you'd give it a go without the dubbing?
Yeah. Like, I mean, the thing is I watch plenty of content in Japanese, right? I mean, we're going to talk
Yeah,
about
I
one
just
later.
sort of I meant this one specifically. Like, do you think that it might, there might be something different in there for watching it like that, or because it's so
Oh,
robotic, do you think it might feel quite similar?
I wouldn't rewatch the whole thing, but I would certainly go back maybe and watch like 2 or 3 clips where I
Mm.
think there's a lot of emotion or a lot of like emphasis on delivery. And I think that might be interesting to watch in Japanese. But then I've done that comparison to hundreds of other pieces of products,
Mm.
and it's never been that influential, to be honest.
Right.
You know, it's more like if you've never, you know, if you're not that used to watching a lot of international like language, you know, dubbed things, it will be quite fascinating to do. But you know, I don't mean to make a big deal out of it, but I've seen a lot of anime and I played a lot of Japanese games. So yeah, you know, Daijabu.
I had a funny image in my head of at one point you were talking about how Sarah speaks robotic, and you said she speaks quite robotically when she tells her parents that tells the other robots that she's going out and stuff like that. And I just had this image of sort of a teenage goes like, God, mum and dad, I'm going out with my friends. We're going clubbing, and her robot parents are like, please, you must stay in. We have a curfew. Like just David Tennant and Rosario Dawson robots having like a stroppy teenage daughter, and she's like, I'm off clubbing, and she's the only human in the whole planet, so there's like there's like no one for her to go clubbing with.
I mean, you're like 70% on point, but she doesn't go clubbing. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
she is a rebellious teenager at one
right,
point,
right,
and
okay,
the robots don't understand because she's making illogical decisions.
yeah.
And they're like,
Oh,
literally, we
okay.
have told her this is dangerous, and she hasn't acknowledged that this is dangerous, and then she does the dangerous thing. Why does she do this? We don't understand.
Maybe I'll give this a go then.
It's
Maybe you
fun.
found an anime for me. After
Well,
Peppa
yeah.
Pig, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
It's nice, and as I say, it's only 4 episodes long. This is really like, this is so clearly just a short story that either the studio wanted to show or someone wanted to tell.
so you don't think there'll be more of it then in the future?
No. It really just like it tells its story. It's done. You're never going to see this exact product ever again. But that's fine because, as I say, it's a sci-fi concept that we're all familiar with. It's just a nice telling of that sci-fi concept.
Good. All right. Well, maybe I'll give it a go. All right. You are a robot who has been programmed to destroy words, destroy any kind of sentence or word that you find. But then one day you're out grabbing, as you were wont to do as a robot, and you come across a single word, just a single baby word. But it's harmless. It's nothing like what your program told you to do to deal with. You feel like you shouldn't kill it. You feel like you should nurture it, and so you do, and you take it home with your other robot friend, and you nurture it from just a single baby word until one day it grows into a whole sentence, a one sentence review of the show Eden, and you sit back, and now fully humanized from your experience with the words, you're able to feel emotions, and you feel the pride of fatherhood, and you look back and you read the sentence that you helped raise into the world, and it says,
Soft, comfortable sci-fi.
oh, so it didn't grow very big, but
It's still a teenager.
yeah, oh, fair enough. Yeah,
It's
all
got
right.
room to grow.
All right, that's it for TV. Apart from in the other section, I've put down Barry. So this is a show that we were talking about potentially reviewing, but we've only seen the first season, and or actually, we haven't even finished the first season, and there's 4 out now. Barry is a show that has been winning just a shitload of awards, and like various sort of accolades, and I started watching it because of that. It's basically a show about a hitman who decides he doesn't really want to be a hitman anymore. He wants to be an actor, but the life of being a hitman is not something you leave too easily. And he ends up having to kill again and again and again. And my experience with it was that it's not bad so far, or at least it started off not bad, but it didn't feel like something that people would be raving as much as they are about the 4th season, until we got to like 1 episode from the end, and I was like, oh, this is really actually starting to hot up. And that basically was the thing that made me say, okay, I'm not going to review this now. I'm going to watch more of it. I'm gonna get more of a grip of it, and probably hopefully get right to the end, and then I'll come back with a review. Have you watched any of this, Jonas, or heard anything about Barry?
No, I've heard about it a lot, and I'm like, I kind of kick myself every time I don't get round to watching it.
Oh.
It is on my list, but like I forget it's on my list all the time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a slow start, but I'm hoping that it's going to get. It's I can already see the glimmers of it starting to build up to what's good. So if you start watching it, you're going to need to set aside enough time to watch the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, that seems to be like one of the barriers to entry. Still, nonetheless, like I do
Barriers.
the ba the ba- um I'll
Sorry, you
watch
were
it
saying.
eventually. I'll watch it eventually, but I would yeah, definitely love to try and make sure that if you're going to talk about it on the podcast, I want to make sure that I've seen enough of it that I can like keep up and kind of not be, not be like a little bit shocked that it includes a theme or an event that I might not have been aware of. But I think it's just a show that I know I'll like. So the problem I have with shows that I know I'll like is I tend to like convince myself that I'm never in the right headspace to enjoy them.
Yeah.
And so I just never get round to them.
Well, I will review it when I've finished it, and then we'll see if I do a severance and I say you must,
it,
and that pushes it up your list. All
it
right,
could happen, yeah.
we're going to move on to the game section, and I'm up this month first, and I'm talking about a little game which actually we did very briefly talk about on the podcast a long, long time ago. It was never officially reviewed, but Jonas basically talked about it in the other section and then said, I think you'd like this game. You should try it. So I put it on my wish list and then promptly forgot about it until a long time after. This game, before I actually get into what it is, it's called The Good Life. This game is hard to Google, and apparently most websites that track Steam prices struggle to track this game as well. If you search it on Google, you get the old British sitcom, you get various albums called The Good Life. The website isthereanydeal.com, which tracks Steam deals, tracks a different game called The Good Life. It shows the picture of this game, but it tracks a different game for some reason. All of this is both annoying for trying to find out information about this game and also totally in keeping with this game. So, The Good Life, I'll start off with a content warning. There is one very prominent murder in the game. Other than that, it's pretty cuddly and friendly for the most part. Um, it's basically an RPG photography game by White Owls Inc. You play Naomi Hayward, a journalist from New York who's been sent to find out why the town of Rainy Woods in England is said to be the happiest town in the world. When you arrive, you're greeted by a woman who explains that they've been waiting for you and that they've set aside a whole house for you, despite you not knowing who these people are in any way. From there, you begin a particularly hard to follow plotline involving cats and dogs, murder, and a mishmash of British mythology. Gameplay mainly focuses around exploring the town of Rainy Woods and photographing things with your camera. You can buy and collect various lenses and bodies for your camera, and you earn cash for taking specific photos or for capturing things that match current hot topics. I'll start with the good aspects of this game. I've never seen an environment in a game that better recreated a small British countryside town. If you think like the villages in the New Forest, roads are sort of curvy and windy with dry stone walls separating leafy green gardens. Large open fields cover the landscape with small rural walking paths. It feels idyllic in all the right ways. It also has a pleasingly goofy art style. Aspects of the characters are exaggerated and they make big, funny movements. Animals are cute and varied, with their designs exemplifying their characters. But unfortunately, outside of the looks, the whole thing really begins to fall apart. The plot is almost unintelligible. Characters' dialogue focuses mainly on verbal tics and style over any kind of understandable exposition. Conversations are often long and uninteresting. The only conversations I enjoyed were with a particularly angry northern Excalibur trying to get me to throw it into the lake. Otherwise, they were universally a drag. At least quest directions are clear, but they themselves have their own issues. You can only track one single quest at a time, and some quest objectives will only trigger if you're tracking it. That means sometimes that random mushroom you happen to pick up actually doesn't count for the collect 10 mushrooms quest unless you were doing nothing but collecting mushrooms. This isn't universally the case, but it is enough of it to be a pain. And with the quests being the core of the game, this starts to grind every time you try and take on a new task. They also they also suffer when they don't give a general location, as the map is unnecessarily huge for how little it's got going on. You spend most of the game in a small central area around the centre of town, only venturing out if a quest objective pings the map out somewhere. So when the game says, take a photo of a giant eagle statue, if it ain't on the high street, I ain't finding it. I think this game suffers from the curse of ambition but a lack of execution. There's scope for a lot here, but it's the details that let it down. A lack of interesting features on a huge map, core things like inventory and photoreal management being clunky and unsatisfying, and money feeling at once useless and annoyingly gatekeepy. This feels like a development build with a severe lack of playtesting. A game that, with a lot more time and work, could have been a quirky, fun RPG, but as it is, it's just a bit of a chore. Jonas, you played it before. You when we spoke about it the other day, when I said I was playing it through, you said that you never finished it. Um, how much of it did you get through?
I don't think I got as far as you because I don't remember finding a northern Excalibur to throw into a lake. I think I remember trying to get into like a particularly cold region, and I had to like keep myself warm somehow.
So we actually have diverging experiences. There's a point where you get 3 paths you can go down. You
Right.
went down one of the paths, and I went down another path because the cold path was what I would have started doing next had I carried on playing. I took path C, and I think you took path A or B or something if you did the cold thing.
Well, I can tell you this. I didn't really get very far in that path because it's one of the last things I remember doing in that game.
Right.
And what's interesting as well is like I if you ask me, Jonas, is this a good game and should I play it now? I would be like, it's kind of weird. I think you'd struggle to like it.
Mm.
So I think you might have asked me about the game when I was still in like a really early like tutorial phase of the game,
Right.
where like the game was still so much ahead of me, and like I knew it was going to have lots of animals and like a murder mystery, and I knew it was going to be like idyllic village simulator.
Mm.
And those parts of the games like are appealing, right? Like, you know, you're going into the country pub and people are talking a little bit about like, you know, you've got your dish of the day and you've got everyone that runs their small little shop, and their shop is very open between specific hours. And it's clear that the developers of this game have really tried to like capture a lot of like small, like taken for granted details of like British countryside life. I think I kickstarted this game, and I because I remember all the updates from the team, White Owls Inc. They are a Japanese video game developer led by a developer I think famously known as like Swery64 or something. I've genuinely forgotten his name a little bit, but they came to England and they were taking pictures of themselves in like the Cotswolds and like up north in like the Lake District, eating like fish and chips. And you know, this to them was like a fundamental part of their like video game research. They had to know what it was like to be in these villages, and I think they went for hikes. I think they were like, the struggling to get like a taxi or drive anywhere or have directions and know things. I think they loved that element of it so much that they were like, wow, I can't wait to recreate every bit of this. And you're right, it feature creep, right? Like they tried to do way too much, and everything that they didn't integrate well with the other things that they did, and felt half baked because they didn't like actually pursue any one mechanic through to a like satisfying conclusion.
Mm.
And you're probably really right about that playtesting. I get the sense that once they had a playable build of the game, they were really just quite interested in like, you know, bugs and making sure it works from start to finish, and less about like player experience. And I'm sure that, you know, for maybe if you show this to like someone who plays like a lot of, you know, lives in Japan and plays a lot of Japanese games, this game is so weird and diverse and like unusual that maybe it's quite hard to perceive a lot of the issues that you and I like might have with the game. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the things that really hit that were problematic, problematic is maybe the wrong word, but the things that felt like they just hadn't been tested enough were the things you hit when you'd played a fair bit of the game. So it was things like, as soon as at one point my inventory capped out of items, and I was like, oh, that's a pain. How do I deal with this? And they're like, you can dump your items in a box at the house or boxes at campsites around the place, but neither of those places are near where you'd want to use most of those items. And any like quest that requires those items doesn't track them if they're not in your inventory. So if you've got like pages and pages of stuff in a box at home and you don't know you've got it there, like you just basically you could spend this time running halfway across the map, going to your box, getting out an item you need, running all the way back, and then being like, and now I need a feather. And you'd be like, I don't fucking know if I've got this feather, running halfway across the map again. And it was little things like that where it was like, there's no option to upgrade my backpack. I Googled it. There's no way of upgrading my backpack. Like, this kind of game, I think, would have benefited from an infinite backpack, because the fun part is not inventory management. The fun part is having found that obscure item somewhere on the map and bringing it to the man who wants it. Like, why do I need my inventory to cap out? At what point is it enjoyable for me to stand at this box and like try and guess what the villagers of Rainy Woods might need? And that sort of feels like it's leading into a Stardew sort of management sim, right? That starts to feel like you're building your own little home and you're going to have your own little farm, and it's going to look and feel like your farm. And it definitely felt like that was a mechanic that was coming at some point later in the game, because one of the characters at one point, I was able to ask him about like doing up my house, and he goes, not yet, young lady. We'll sort that out later. And I was like, well, why have I got all the downsides of a management sim where I have to like manage items in a big box, but none of the upsides? I can't clear the cobwebs in the house. I can't rearrange the farm. I've got 300 potatoes and nothing to do with them. Like it felt like they like you say, they had feature creep. They had loads of ideas and they just couldn't. They had played it to death. So whenever they wanted to test the house building stuff, they just jumped to that. And they never had anyone go, well, hold on, like 10 hours into this game, I haven't got access to that thing, but I've got 300 stone in a box. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I look back at that game and I'm like, I am charmed that it was made. Like, I am happy that someone tried to make this game, then they didn't. But yeah, the ungoogleable good life kind of, it does end up being a little bit more of a like, it's a fun kind of like experiment of a game.
To me, it just feels like a missed opportunity, because the promise is there, right? The promise of a really nice, quaint British game through the lens of a Japanese developer is really nice. And you could see, you could see love in the art style, and you could see love in some of the ideas. But then it just felt like it was rushed to the end. Little details like, a mild spoiler for something you see on the Steam page, but some of the characters turn into animals. And in the game, you get this quest where it's like, go into town and something might happen, and then a massive tutorial window pops up talking about some characters in their animal forms, and I was like, you're spoiling the end of this quest line in this. And they obviously had a thing where like some people didn't understand what was going on, so they had to put a big prompt there. They couldn't rework the flow of it. They put a big prompt up instead. And I was like there's so many little missed opportunities throughout this. I would love a game set in this town where I can explore these things, where they stripped most of the map away and they just put everything. They put a lot of love and care and attention into 10 characters in the middle of the town. What I want is Stardew Valley. That's what I want. Yeah.
If only you could play Stardew Valley. Like, if only someone had made that game. That would be such a shame.
Yeah.
All right, Jamie.
Yep.
You are a journalist from London, and you're sent to find out why the village of Bunyip Reviews is said to be the happiest podcast-based village in all of Podcast Mania. And you get there, and it's a surprising reception, right? You get given a house, you get given, everyone in town is a different podcast, and at night they turn it into their own podcast. But of course, there is a mystery to be solved. Someone has tried to make the Forbidden Podcast. The Forbidden Podcast is, of course, the one-line summary of the good life. You run for hours over fields. You fetch items that quest trackers don't keep track of, so you have to run and mark them again. You have awkward dialogues that drain the life out of you and make you wish that you'd never taken up such an adventure. But eventually, after all the photos taken, after all the money gained, after all the quirky podcasts you have to find at night, you find the Forbidden Podcast that is just a one-line review of the game The Good Life, the ungoogleable game by White Owls Inc. You plug it into your headphones and listen. You click play. What do you hear?
A quaint British town full of missed opportunities.
The cassette comes to an end. End credits roll.
That's also the town motto for Maidenhead.
What, just a missed opportunities?
A quaint little town full of missed opportunities. All right, we're going to move on to Jonas's review of the month, and this is probably SEO gold for us. Jonas, what are you reviewing this month?
No one's ever heard of this game. It's called The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, man. So, this is the highly anticipated sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Both of these games developed and published by Nintendo. Tears of the Kingdom takes place a few years later in the same world and version of Hyrule. And I say this because if you don't know this, a lot of Zelda games tend to take place in entirely different universes. They tend to take place in different Hyrules with different Links and different Zeldas and different art styles. But this is a direct sequel to the game before it. Now, if you haven't played Breath of the Wild, don't worry. A lot of what is true for Breath of the Wild is true for Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm going to try and highlight what makes this game particularly special. This is a sequel, and after becoming all-powerful and saving the world in Breath of the Wild, the hero of Hyrule, Link, discovers a deep energy, dark energy deep underground. Within minutes of playing the game, your character, Link, is nearly killed. Zelda goes missing, and the entire land of Hyrule erupts with a dark energy, falling to, yet another calamity. Link wakes up in a temple floating in the sky above Hyrule, and after a lengthy and quite comprehensive tutorial sort of island, you return to Hyrule below and you seek out Zelda to once again save Hyrule. This is kind of how a lot of Zelda games start, to be honest. Obviously, there's lots of similarities to Breath of the Wild, which came before it. And having more of a good thing is good, especially in this case when we've had several years since the last game to kind of breathe and re-explore this world. So fans of recent Zelda titles will definitely be pleased to know that the strengths of Breath of the Wild are still present in this game. But one of the most fundamental highlights of Breath of the Wild was exploration. You could explore this incredibly huge world with little to no idea of what awaited you behind every forest, every hill, and every mountain. The world was exceptionally well designed to let your curiosity lead you forward. And the thing is Tears of the Kingdom can't really capture that same feeling if it reuses the same world map. So it needs to do something different. And it did. Hyrule is now split into 3 distinct zones. And I don't mean as in up, down, left. What I mean is land, sky, and depths. In the sky, there are now these huge floating structures, these bits of land, these mini puzzles, these boss fights, these set pieces that Breath of the Wild players couldn't have possibly encountered before because they weren't there. But they also introduce a verticality to the world. You now really care about, how gravity and how defying gravity lets you play around with the world, the physics, and the objects. On the land, this new calamity has reshaped familiar areas. Areas that were dangerous in the previous game and hard to access are now maybe your starting zone and maybe familiar territory, whereas it's harder to get to areas that you were familiar with in Breath of the Wild. And then there's the depths. This is a completely unknown pitch black layer of map which mimics Hyrule in its scale, which is already quite phenomenal. It's thick in an environmental hazard called gloom that if you touch it rips away your maximum life points. It's devoid of light, forcing you to create your own light sources and explore in the dark. The depth is this whole new world where you have little to no idea of what awaits you. And interestingly, it means that you do, once again, get to explore a world mostly fueled by your own curiosity. It does manage, with its own twist, to bring back one of the greatest strengths of Breath of the Wild. And if introducing 2 whole layers of map wasn't enough, Link now explores Hyrule with completely different powers. Breath of the Wild players will remember that the physics playground of Hyrule and using stasis to launch debris and themselves across the map would result in these like hilarious and game-breaking results. Whereas Tears of the Kingdom now lets you glue items together to form structures, devices, vehicles, weapons, etc. If an item can go in your inventory or if it can be like interacted with in any way, chances are Link is now able to freely move, rotate, glue, fuse, rewind that item for a near infinite number of results. Extrapolate that simple kind of those abilities to the sheer scale of Hyrule, and then add in the verticality, the 3 layers of the world, and suddenly you just have an infinite number of ways to kind of satisfy your own curiosity at any given moment. And everything that you approach just has no single answer. And if that, that was all that's all entirely leveled up kind of Breath of the Wild already. And there was one thing that Breath of the Wild also just really kind of let down, which was story. The story was, Breath of the Wild was so open world that the 4 major dungeons in the game were completely optional. If you did them, the final boss would be easier and you get some abilities. But other than that, those story elements didn't really have much staying power. Tears of the Kingdom gives you less information about how to just complete the game and instead asks you to explore the world in a slightly more guided sense. You're given you're given quests that the game would like you to pursue. You're given dialogue that explicitly tries to lead you to specific places and people so that you'll discover more story elements. And unlike Breath of the Wild, you're not just pointed at a final boss and told, "Go get him, boy." Instead, you're asked to find Zelda, a mystery that genuinely requires you to interact with the story and explore the world and understand the implications of everything you are seeing and hearing. I found the narrative payoff for all my hard work incredibly satisfying, and it made working my way towards the game's climactic ending all the more worthwhile. This game came out middle of May, and I spent the next 4 weeks playing 150 hours of this game. Not a single one of those hours was wasted. I loved being able to revisit Hyrule once again. I loved flexing my creativity with the building system and solving as many problems as I could using solutions that it felt like only I could have possibly thought of. This is a phenomenally well-created game with a staggering amount of polish and quality from start to finish. Jamie, I know you don't have a Switch, or at least I know that this is not a game that you are easily able to get your hands on. But you know the legacy of this game. You will have seen the accolades of this game. You will have seen a lot of the hype and excitement for this game. And you will have seen that same stuff about Breath of Wild before it. So sort of a more open question is, from the outside in, what are your thoughts when you look at these two Zelda titles, these two absolute game of the year titans that just exist on a piece of hardware that obviously you can't really touch right now?
So I have a lot of friends who are playing this game, or have, yeah, I think still are playing this game at the moment. And I've had a lot of conversations about them. And actually, it's kind of nice having conversations about this game because it's so open. Because one of the core things about it is exploration, and one of the joys is discovering these things on your own. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. Like when they have when I hear people have conversations about it, they go, "Have you done the thing? Have you been to the place?" So they struggle to talk about it. But when they're around me, because they know I'm not going to play it because I don't have a Switch, they're really open about it. So I actually hear really interesting things. I actually hear why they like the game, which is actually quite nice. So I sat down with some friends, and they basically took me through their favorite bits of this and how they solved certain puzzles and what they liked. And it sounds really great. But I will ask you some of the questions that I asked them, and I'll see what you think about them. The first one being that obviously this takes place on a changed version of, but the same map as Breath of the Wild. It incorporates a lot of the existing mechanics of Breath of the Wild, and it's on the same piece of hardware. Despite all of the enhancements they've made, people are still referring to them as sort of in the same vein, right? They're not a bigger leap as some of the, like, Wind Waker to this or something like that. So if, say, someone like me were to buy a Switch and they wanted to try one of these games, would you suggest that they needed to play through all of Breath of the Wild, or would you suggest they jump in at Tears of the Kingdom?
I think Breath of the Wild is not a prerequisite to Tears of the Kingdom, but it is like there's a follow through, right? Like there is a through line. There are NPCs who will talk to you as if you've met them before. There are areas who will welcome you back with open arms. And these areas are sometimes remixed to kind of like offer a fresh perspective for old Breath of the Wild players. So that to Tears of the Kingdom, they will just be like they'll just be the default. Like you'll come to an area remixed, but you won't know that it's different than its base version, which I don't know, could be like an extra layer of confusion or difficulty to someone who hasn't like been to this place before. So I think from a certain perspective, it's like if you were going to play either of these games with no context, I would just tell you to play Breath of the Wild, because you're going to get one, the intended experience, like just from start to finish. You're not going to have any weird confusion, and you're not going to be missing out on reference and content and context. But you are still going to play a like 10 out of 10 Zelda Switch experience. Tears of the Kingdom is it is another, it is a sequel, but it is also a 10 out of 10 Zelda experience. Like they are both phenomenally good games. And I would say that if you play Tears of the Kingdom second, you will still play a good game, but there's just a lot of stuff that like isn't going to be delivered to you. Whereas if you play Breath of the Wild, you play a good game and you get all the right context, and you now present yourself with the opportunity to go play the sequel.
No,
You don't
that's
miss that
good.
opportunity.
It's funny because like, so when I posed this to the other friends of mine who've played it, their response was basically, they are similar enough, and that Tears of the Kingdom is an enhancement enough that you probably would get a good experience of just watching the major story beats on YouTube for Breath of the Wild and then jumping in at Tears of the Kingdom. What do you say to that kind of idea?
I don't know. There are smaller elements of Breath of the Wild that I think are really like, I think they're worth sitting down and having the controller in your hand when they first happen.
Right.
When you first like ride your horse across like a glade and that melody starts playing and you're like, this is it.
Mm.
I'm exploring Hyrule. This is the music that plays. When you like see a glow somewhere and you spend like 3 hours climbing a mountain, getting distracted, fighting a goblin camp, solving a puzzle, finding an item that you didn't expect, finding an NPC and solving their problem, and then after 3 hours getting to that location and it was only 20 minutes away from you. It's that kind of like, and it's because the world is so well designed, like it is so kind of meticulously well crafted to let your curiosity lead you in a direction and let it pull at you in different directions without it ever being like a negative, right? Like
Yeah.
it's always a positive to fulfill your curiosity with those games. I think those are worth experiencing in Breath of the Wild. I think like, people who've played that game know what it's like to fight the creepy robot guardians that have like spider legs and fire lasers at you. People remember like, using that paraglider like kind of for the first time. I just think there's so much about that world where the thing about Tears of the Kingdom as well is to help you like not have to put up with like going from A to B again the hard way. Because of all the verticality, you can like launch yourself in the air and kind of just keep flying and gliding to anywhere on the ground.
Mm.
So rather than going from A to B on the ground, you just shoot up in the air and then you just fall down to B and shoot up
Yeah.
in the air and fall down to C and shoot up. So you can skip huge amounts of the map because of the verticality. But you feel more comfortable doing that because you play Breath of the Wild. You know what
Right.
that forest is like. You have a good idea of what the topography of the land is like. So that Tears of the Kingdom kind of gives you that as a reward. It's like, well, you know this map, so actually, why don't you just catapult yourself over there?
Okay.
So I think there's a lot about Breath of the Wild that like it feels timeless and it's not aged. It's not an aged game yet. Like it just isn't. So I would tell someone to play Breath of the Wild, definitely.
All right. And my other question
Mm.
is, so I watched the announcement trailer when they showed off all of the gluing mechanic. And it looked very cool. The idea that you could just take any item in the game and glue it together. And since then, obviously, Twitter and YouTube and like all the internet's just been full of people making awesome flying machines and giant men with flaming penises and all that kind of stuff. But my first thought was, and I get this gut feeling whenever anything is sort of procedural or like you can use the things in the world to do what you want, or it's random, or those kind of things. Is that the ability for you to sort of make your own out of the pieces that are provided, does that remove some of the unique crafted stuff that would be in the game? So, for example, I know that in Breath of the Wild, there's loads of weapons that you can find, kind of thing, and they're all crafted, right? Because there's no gluing mechanic, right? The sword you find is the sword you find, right? Do you find that because they're expecting you to glue a big stick to a shield or whatever, that there's less of that, like, you found the sword of David or whatever?
Um, so the one of the biggest controversies of Breath of the Wild was weapon durability.
Hmm.
Don't know if you've heard
I
this.
did, yes.
So like you find a cool weapon, you hit an enemy with it 30 times, it breaks. And it's gone forever. So weapon individuality can only really be as good as shiny sword, very shiny sword, shiniest sword. Oh, it broke.
Hmm.
Shiny spear, shit spear, very shiny spear. Oh, it broke. And people found that really hard to work with, right? Because like you find a weapon you like and it would break, so you kind of didn't want to use it. But the flip side was, well, no. That means you are always exploring, and every
Hmm.
fight that you get rewarded with a weapon, that weapon is a reward because the one you had before just broke. So
Hmm.
you need this new weapon. So the world always felt like it was kind of rewarding you. Um, but what would happen in the old game is like you'd get a weapon that does electric damage, and that was cool, and it would break. And now you'd kind of like have to go find another electric damage, and that might be quite hard. I don't need to do that anymore. I got a stick and I got a piece of fruit that does electric damage. I'm gonna fuse it to the end of my stick. I've now got electric stick. It's gonna break later, but don't worry. I've got another stick and I've got ice fruit, fire fruit, electric fruit. I've got a random gem that like, when I put it on the end of my weapon, it fires like starlight or something. I've got like this crazy weird horn that when I killed an enemy, I got their horn. and I can attach the horn to my arrow, and it makes my arrow do like bludgeoning 10 times damage. And I've only got a few of those horns, but if I'm sneaking up on something and I'm going to hit it in the face with an arrow, you can bet I'm going to use one of these horns because it'll be worth it. So it makes, in that sense, it makes it enables every useless item in your inventory. Like your inventory, you were talking about infinite inventory in Good Life. This is a game that gives you infinite inventory, and by fucking Jove, do you need it. But it's like when you've killed like 20,000 enemies and you're just covered in their body parts, you realize, wait a second, I should be using these. I should be fusing every single one of these to every single one of my arrows, every single one of my weapons, every shield. I should be enhancing everything all the time. And that what made the fusing system really cool.
So it does retain a sort of idea of uniqueness, but where in Breath of the Wild that uniqueness was, either kind of frustrating because once you lost it, you couldn't get it back again, or kind of meaningless because it was just a different look on a sword that, you were just going to burn through that sword anyway. Whereas in this, the uniqueness comes from the sort of making the most of everything, like just tearing apart a monster and then sticking its horn on something, and now you're like, you do have that feeling of finding a unique weapon because you made it out of the things you had around you, kind of thing. That's really cool. I really like that.
Yeah. And honestly, like, by the end of the game, I was like attaching these fire horns to swords, and then I had a fire weapon, but then I wouldn't use it for combat. I would use it to keep me warm in cold climates. I was finding like secondary uses for like certain items in certain scenarios. That was really cool. And one, I'm gonna circle back real quick to those like abilities you get. Um, there's a very fun thing you can do in this game, right? So you've got the ability to like just grab anything and telekinesis it. And you have to use this to solve a lot of problems, like navigation problems. Like, how do I get from here to there without using as many resources, like using the least number of resources? One of my favorite interactions in that game is one of your 4 abilities is to swim up into anything, into an object. So if there is a cave above you, you can just swim up into the cave and your character will emerge at whatever is at the other side vertically of that thing. And you can just use this to hilarious effect. You can get a plank of wood and you can float it in midair and hold it there for about 10 seconds. You can't now swim up underneath it because you're holding it in midair. One of your other abilities is rewind. It will rewind any item through like the last 20 seconds of its movement. So float an object in the air, hold it there for 10 seconds, drop it. Rewind it. It now goes up in the air and stays there for 10 seconds. Go underneath it. While it's still being rewound, swim up into it. You are now 20 feet off the air. You now have like air advantage. You have the ability to glide somewhere that you couldn't glide before. You've got the ability to, if you've got a glider that needs a bit of forward momentum and a bit of like air before it can take off, you can do that here, 20 foot off the ground. If you needed to build something in midair, you're 20 feet in the air. Start building. You've got 5 more seconds. Let's go. And you find ways to combine rewinding and grabbing and fusing and gluing and swimming up through things to just like constantly evolve this playground of physics and abilities that you've been given. And just again, coming back to it, polish. This game just never broke. It never broke. And I'm not even like stress testing it, but I've seen people who are putting like 25 flamethrowers on a vehicle wheel and then attaching that vehicle wheel to like a enemy hunting drone ground thing, and then making it so that they can fly in the air and detach that in midair as like an orbital strike cannon. And it just works every time. Anything you want to do in that game, it works. And that is genuinely, in this AAA space where we are complaining about buggy games on release.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. As someone who's excited for Starfield. All right. You once produced an incredible 1-sentence review. Well regarded, 10 out of 10s across the board. And then you announced you were going to make a sequel. and people were very excited for the sequel, because the first one was really, really good. They really, really enjoyed it. It was an exemplar of the genre, and you started working on it, and you I don't know what you made one, and it turned out to be just as good. And the review was a review of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. What was
and
it?
it said, and it said, um,
I
yeah,
didn't know where I
yeah.
was going to go with that.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. Don't
Thank
worry, you
you.
did great, buddy. Saving Hyrule never felt so good.
Nice. Your review
Never
was
felt
better
so,
than my setup. All
never
right.
felt so good.
We're gonna have to race through these because there's 6 or 5 games in the other section, and it's already quarter to 10,
Yeah.
and we have a quite long movie section as well. So, Jonas, Street Fighter 6. What be?
Street Fighter 6, new Street Fighter game. It's cool. It's like super colorful, and it's like trying to be like really street and hip hop and accessible. I've never played a Street Fighter game like ever, like apart from the when I picked up someone else's copy and fought them. So this is my first Street Fighter game. It's fun. It's got a character creator. It's got a fun like single player story mode. It's just really, it's really flashy and silly, and it's like very accessible for new players. So if you think you might like a Street Fighter game ever in your life, the best time to get into fighting games is when they've just come out. So get into Street Fighter 6. I'm not very good at it. Talk to me. I'll play with you. I won't beat you at this game like I would at Tekken. I'm bad. It's fun.
Cool. Darkest Dungeon 2, which we reviewed its predecessor on this podcast. How
We
is the
did.
sequel?
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you played the sequel?
No.
Great. It's been in early access for a long time. 1.0 has now come out, so it's out on Steam. This is good. It is different. It is a different game. You can see why it's a Darkest Dungeon sequel, but this is more like a roguelike. This is genuinely more of a roguelike with like fixed chapters and story bits that when you reach them, the game kind of moves forward a step. But it's cool. I like the narrative elements a lot. This feels way more accessible than Darkest Dungeon 1. I'm looking forward to playing a lot more of this game.
Cool. And then you've put Corpo Nation, the prologue, which I've been seeing trailers for on Twitter, and it looks right up my alley. Tell
Yeah,
us
as I
about it.
say, you like Papers, Please? If you like Papers, Please, you like Corpo Nation. They released the prologue, which is a free-to-play opening act of what is going to be their fuller game later on. It's you play the first week of someone who has been like woken up to do a part-time job in this corporate like hellscape. You have to sort out test tubes and put them in the right pipes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yep. I said the right word. It's cool. It's got all the like Papers, Please DNA of like the job gets harder every day with more elements, but also there is a hacker telling you to not do your job and they'll pay you. And you're trying to pay off your bills, but you're also trying to like maybe decorate your house. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll buy a plushie that is like government approved. It's a really interesting game, and more importantly, it's made by people who I met last year at a video game conference, and I've been looking forward to this game ever since because I like the concept.
Cool. I'm going to wait for the full thing to come out because I know I want to play it, and I don't want to burn myself out on the demo. I've been playing a little bit of Shadow of Mordor, whatever it's called, Shadow of War, the Mordor, Middle Earth, Shadow of War. Oh God, well I could have guessed that. That is the sequel to Shadow of Mordor, the big action adventure Lord of the Rings game with the Nemesis system. And the reason I was playing it is because the last time I played it, when I actually bought it, it was I was still on my old iMac and it ran like shit. And the other day I was like, oh, actually I really like the first game. I got a computer that can run it now. Let's fucking go. And I have to say, there's a reason why those games are beloved. That game is fucking great. It is, popcorn for the brain in terms of, repetitive but fun combat actions, fun dialogues, all this kind of stuff. Just a really chill time. And the best thing about it is that they've removed all of the microtransaction stuff. So it just is now, which
It's
is
just a
fucking
game.
great.
the nemesis system in that game is legendary. So I hope we talk more about that at some point.
Yeah, I might do a review at some point of it if I play through a lot more.
Yeah, sure. You just reminded me the Gollum game exists.
Oh god, oh god.
Yeah.
I kind of want to play it to review it.
Should we do a random game Netflix Steam random game wheel?
We could do this is a real aside. Maybe we should every year we should play the lowest rated Steam game of the previous year. Lowest rated AAA release of the
I was just gonna
year.
say that's gonna be a weird porn
I don't want to
game
play
or something.
like XX Hitler Sex Cult or something. Lowest rated game from an actual major publisher of the last year.
I know what you mean. Like the biggest shit show game of the year.
We'll work out the wording, but that might be fun. All right.
Cool.
And then the last thing on this list is Do Not Feed the Monkeys 2099, which is a sequel to Do Not Feed the Monkeys. I don't remember if I ever talked about it on the podcast, but the premise is basically that you have been given access to this club where you're able to watch like CCTV cameras or hidden cameras in people's lives. And the official rules are that you do not feed the monkeys, meaning you do not interact with them in any way. But obviously, inevitably, you start to interact with them. And the original one was a really nice little puzzle, which was basically you can get through the game without interacting with anyone. But then you start to uncover like some things you can't interact with at all and some things you can. And part of the fun of the puzzle is working out where the puzzle is. And like, and it had a really quite clever feeling of when you manage to make something weird happen because of something that you did, it was always because you were curious, not because the game guided you in that direction. And I really like that about it. 2099 is basically more of the same. It's a similar thing, but it's obviously set in the near future. Although in this case, it's a quite heavily like dystopian, distant future feeling to it. I have to say that I like it. It's good. It is more of the same, and it's interesting the new stories they put in, but there was a relatability to the first one because it was set in present day that is missing from this. So you have to do a lot of learning about the world. There was a lot of things in the first game where they were using either exactly the thing or an analog of the thing in real life that allowed you to make leaps of logic very quickly. In this, you don't have that. You have to learn, that there's multiple planets and like corporations and shit like that. And it's, I don't know, it takes the edge off it a bit in a way that I don't like as much. But yeah. Cool. All right. We're going to take a brief break. Aurora just walked into the room, meowed at me to tell me that it's break time. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, grab a glass of water. When we come back, we'll be doing the movie section, where we'll be talking about 2 superhero movies, one very highly reviewed by other esteemed critics, and the other one. And then we will be talking about a random Netflix movie that you might actually want to watch. So that's an interesting. I hope hopefully that will keep you interested. All right. Yeah, we'll be back in a moment.
Back in a mo.
All right. Right. I'm gonna quickly run and grab a glass of water because my throat is parched. So I'm just gonna put us straight on break if that's all right.
All right.
Jonas?
Yeah. Go.
All right. See you in a moment.
See you in a moment.
Right. Are we ready? No, apparently not.
Yeah.
Oh, no! Piss!
Oh, brightness up does brightness down. Oh, I'm holding it upside down. That's why.
If you've eaten an apple just before you drink piss, then it's still good. It's still good. You know it's good piss. Yeah.
The cars are becoming shortly. Get out of the road.
Oh. No! I forgot that. How do you know the key for that?
Okay. Sorry, Stu wants to that immediately choose it.
I'm someone who's very focused around comfort. Leather does not look.
Oh god, I'm glad for the second half of that.
I am horny for rice pudding. # all boobs matter. So this is launch rocket. Oh! Oh my god, we're gonna die again! I've never been sucked so many times in one session. You don't have to be gay to examine the hit points of a nutsack. We're going to take a brief break to fix this. Hammering away at those rocks.
Oh, hey, laddie, I'm Scotland.
You see someone wearing that little purple logo and you know there's pussy about. Tom's souffle is collapsed and so he's shanked David in a fit of rage. My YouTube apology will be up tomorrow.
Fully monetized, 46 minutes. 18 ad breaks.
You got to make some money somehow. The spirits must be cleansed. Someone eating at their station?
No.
Wildlife in this game is mental.
Yeah. They came right at me.
Go back to the fucking beginning.
Keep on trying.
Should we exchange insurance? No,
No,
okay,
God,
bye.
God. I've got a
Alright.
feeling they don't have insurance.
Oh!
Yeah.
Fucking hell! Problem solved. Oh, her.
Ah.
Okay. Oh! No! Miss my button!
Nope. You literally punched her. Oh my.
Package. Delivered.
What happened if they touch?
Ghostbusters?
Oh, there's another dude in me. In me.
When it said 35C there, and I was like, 35 Celsius? That's fucking warm.
No! No! No!
Can you see the lines?
No. all the rooms are 35 Celsius. Why? Just for science.
I'm offering my next.
You can.
Someone?
Are you gonna fire him out the cannon?
No!
Oh my god! The sword presents a secondary danger. Oh! Oh no!
Oh
So long, friend!
Why would that be a selling point?
It's
Who walked in there?
exclusively to lizard people.
I'm a good song, man.
Extremely
Mind if we come in?
convinced.
Is that we all share the nuts. So if Stu takes an executive decision to nut all over these birds in the cave, then that's half our nuts gone. I'm doing everything I can to lose all responsibility through incompetence.
Now I understand why Captain Hook was the way he was.
Again, democracy has failed.
Annoyed. Gay and annoyed.
He settled in front of me. He sat down.
Oh, happiness, but tale of maybe not happiness.
Your mouse pad is so hairy.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, this is Civ 4.
Oh.
Wait, what? Oh my god, it is! Oh my. Hello, everybody. We're back. That's right, we're back. Hello, we're back.
We're back.
Right. Do you want to do clicks or claps or whatever you want to do?
That'll do.
All right. All right, we're back. And it's the movie section. And this month, I'm up first, and I'm talking about Man and The Wasp, Quantumania, because the names are getting longer and longer and longer. A content warning, I guess, is these are Marvel movies, and they're still making fucking Marvel movies, and and that's content warning enough.
This is the latest in the Ant-Man series, if you hadn't guessed from the title. Scott Lang, whose alter ego is the titular Ant-Man, played by Paul Rudd, is living the high life now that all of that Avengers stuff is over. He's got a lovely wasp-like wife, his mentor Hank Pym and Hank's long-lost wife Janet are returned, and now he has custody over his criminal daughter. Then, for no good reason, they're all sucked into the quantum realm. The Quantum Realm is now a low imagination Star Wars planet where various strange creatures and people in full face makeup are living in sci-fi cities ruled over by a shadowy despot. All the Marvel franchises at this point are past their prime, though the way in which they end up like that varies from show to show. Thor became a bad student improv group, Doctor Strange is now 5 bad horror films crammed into one runtime, and Ant-Man is seemingly a concerted effort to learn nothing from any of George Lucas's mistakes. The big new setting we spend all of our time in, the Quantum Realm, really feels like it wants to lean towards the feeling Star Wars creates so well of a living, breathing, varied alien universe. It falls short, however, due to its extensive use of CGI to create literally everything. Half the cast, at the very least, glows in some magical way, and the other half are full CGI characters that don't feel real or grounded. It doesn't help that the movie is basically Paul Rudd's adventures on green screen. So much of everything is not real that the cast feels lost. They feel like children play acting with invisible monsters to fight. It has all the worst qualities of early CGI films that saw it as a solution to all of their imagination problems. And nowhere is this more evident than in the character of MODOK, a character that is somehow more ridiculous in this than when he was voiced by Patton Oswalt. MODOK is a character that barely looked good in comic form, worked quite well in stop-motion cartoon, but really fails to fit in CGI. In suit, he looks like a chrome McDonald's toy. Out of it, his face looks like someone has improperly scaled a JPEG. But in truth, MODOK is more of a symptom of the fact that I'm not really sure they know what people want out of this franchise anymore. There are goofier superheroes, fightier superheroes, dadlier superheroes. MODOK works if you take him seriously, and he works if you don't, but he doesn't work if you don't know where you're going with him, and that goes for Ant-Man double. It's unclear what Scott Lang wants, why any of this happened, and despite the threat being world-ending apparently, why we should care. A large part of the stakes in this film are as a consequence of and a lead into upcoming and past Loki seasons, and so they try to balance the fact that Kang will be there, be the villain, by stringing his reveal out as long as possible to tease you, while also being vague on where he's from and what he's up to so as not to spoil future plot points. None of that distracts you from MODOK though. When you see him put in his suit like a discount Darth Vader, his rubbery hairless ass looks like those alien toys you'd put in the fridge because you'd hope they'd reproduce. His tiny cheeks look like testicles pull smooth. His flimsy little chicken strip he calls a body looks like you could roll him into a ball, or if you touched him your hands would be damp for the rest of the day. Corey Stoll is less playing MODOK than he is stretched across him like the face of Bo in a phone case. There is one good performance though, the highlight of the whole endeavour, and that is Jonathan Majors as Kang. Majors puts on a masterclass. He feels powerful when he needs to and vulnerable when he needs to. He outclasses everyone he's in a scene with. Maybe that's because for everyone else this is just a paycheck, but it's not for him. Majors is the bright spot of the MCU, and these shows might be worth continued watching even as the rest of these films go downhill just for him. All in all, Quantumania is a film that doesn't know what it wants to be and tries really hard not to learn any of the lessons of the films it's inspired by. Paul Rudd deserves better, but to be honest, he is probably being paid well enough not to care. Corey Stoll cannot have been paid well enough to embarrass himself like that, though. His face looks like the face of a child with a cold who leans over your desk and snots on your favourite pens. He's a testimony to man's hubris. We learnt the power to create new worlds and we used it to stuff a whole man into what looks like a bin designed for gamers. Jonas, did you watch this film?
I'm not going to answer that question until I quickly just roll back to the fact that this just became like a MODOK diss track.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it feels like a lot of the energy you put into this review is to try and come up with the most colorful and creative ways you possibly could to insult this exact portrayal of MODOK in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I appreciate the dedication. I do. That's it's genuinely a lot of fun.
I think that as much as I talked about MODOK a lot during this review, I think that he's not the main problem with it. I think the problem is the sort of aimlessness of it. But I think he is a symptom of this. Now we're at the point in Marvel movies where the sort of the interesting drive, the start point of every character is quite fun. You know, the first Ant-Man movie where we were playing with the idea of this character, we were establishing him and his flaws and all these kind of things. That was a really fun movie. And then the second movie was a bit worse because some of his flaws had been buffed out. That was the point of his hero's journey, right? So now we bring in a couple of other characters who he has to sort of use his newfound hero-ness to save. And by the third movie, well, he's saved everyone now. And he's buffed out all of his flaws. So why are we here? So now we're here to sort of, you know, make more money from this movie and, you know, bring in various elements of the canon to sort of be like, oh, it was worth this movie because we got to see Kang and we got to see MODOK. But because there is no point to this movie, there's also no point to MODOK. MODOK is a character that, when he had his own show, when there was the Patton Oswalt sort of stop motion animation show, it was a show about how absurd this character was, and it was a really funny, interesting character study of this character. In this, he is a name plastered across a bad CGI villain, and I think that they sort of went really hard on something that was just bad.
Jamie. Corey Stoll plays MODOK.
Yeah.
Do you know who else he played?
He played the villain in the first Ant-Man, yeah.
Is there an MCU reason why they're played by the same actor, or is it just recasting?
No, it's the same character. So,
okay.
So,
okay.
If you are desperate not to have this dreadful movie spoiled for you, plug your ears now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When Ant-Man defeats what's his name, he goes tiny. He sends him to the he goes tiny, so tiny he goes into the quantum realm. And when Kang finds him, all of his proportions are fucked up. So his head's enormous and his body's tiny and all this kind of stuff. And he's like near death. And Kang saves him by putting him in the robot suit. So that's why he has the massive face but the tiny body, and why he is MODOK, because he's it's like modulated organism designed only for killing or something like that. That's what the name means, right? So he is the same character rescued by Kang, and he feels he must kill both for revenge from the first movie and also because it is who he is. And then, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that narratively comes back around in a satisfying and wholesome, a real kind of like, just a gut puncher, really, isn't that
I mean,
one?
honestly, if you really wanted to do MODOK, if you really wanted to have MODOK somewhere in the MCU, just have him be a new character. Like just and then just make him really fucking weird. Like have him be have the Patton Oswalt like MODOK be the character. He's the only stop motion character in the whole of the MCU. And like he's always stop motion even when it's a full live action thing. I'd love that. That'd be great.
You can make silly characters that end up being like a genuine threat to the world and the urgency of the characters, like a different superhero film that takes a silly character voiced by a silly man and makes him a literal threat to the universe that we might talk about later. Okay, cool. Sorry. Have I watched this film? No. Do I remember the last two films? I've watched them, but no. Will I watch this film? Probably eventually, but really reluctantly. I am bored of Marvel, but I still like acknowledge that there are likely to be elements of that universe that I like want to see personified. Because that is largely what Marvel is for me, right? Like it's a personification of superhero and fantasy and sci-fi concepts that can't be brought to life on a low budget. So Marvel has lots of money and they will bring those things to life. It is a shame that they do it sometimes as like, as you say, Fisher Price, my first CGI adventure, but it's, you know, it's their money to spend.
I think there's a few problems going on. The first is they're really reluctant to take risks on established franchises, right? So the first Iron Man movie was really good, and it felt pretty out there. Like a big chunk of it was about the Iraq War, right? Or Afghanistan or something like that, right? The first Thor movie was pretty bad, but like when they started to move into the sort of comedy aspect of Thor, that started to be pretty interesting. Or the first Guardians movie was pretty fun. It was like an ensemble comedy show kind of thing. But when they become established money-making franchises, when they're actually like, you know, when Thor appears at Disney World and all that kind of shit, then they can't take any risks. Then they can't do anything, right? You know, Scott Lang can't become kind of, you know, dangerous in any real way. And then at the same time, they have this problem of, like that they're, you know, that the first of all of these movies is exploring a nuanced broken character that goes on a hero's journey. That's what a Marvel movie is. But once they've done that, they can't do it again, right? And there's only so many times you can add new characters that they have some tangential relationship to that they need to save before you're like, and it's why why every storyline leads to an Avengers. It's because eventually all of the people run out of smaller things to save, and now they need to save the entire universe or something like that. You know, the notable exception is that dreadful Doctor Strange movie, which really did try to turn him into a villain, and which really did try to be dark and weird, and ended up just feeling like, you know, not like any of these characters at all should be, you know. And I think that like what they're never going to do this, but what I want is for them to take chances. What I want is for established series to take chances. You know, the first series of Loki was really good. There's going to be a second series of Loki. I feel like I need to understand Kang and all this shit going on so that I can understand the second series of a show I really liked. But are they going to strip all of the risk taking out of it? Is it now going to become a quite slow? You know, I loved WandaVision. WandaVision was great, but they're not going to do anything like that again with Wanda.
Nope.
Yeah.
They look at the definitely risk they took with that character.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, yeah, the fact is like there's nothing we can say about this film that we haven't said about other films. All we can really do is kind of commiserate Marvel again.
Yeah.
I
think that the only interesting thing about talking about individuals, and we probably won't talk about another Marvel movie unless it's particularly good for a while, I imagine. But the notable thing is how they all fail in different ways. How they all have a seed of a problem in them that as the good stuff recedes, that seed grows. You know, as I mentioned in my review, Thor was, now it just feels sort of like bad improv at this point. You know, Doctor Strange was just chaotic and just a fucking mess, you know, and this really feels like they're, you know, going, well, maybe we can do a Star Wars thing. Maybe we can lean into the CGI aspect of it and not learning any of the lessons of the original, of the sequel Star Wars trilogy.
I'm eventually gonna watch Black Panther 2, and I'm quite. That's one that I haven't really heard people talk about in any one direction. People haven't said it's exceptional. You have to see it. People haven't said, "Oh God, not another one. This is awful. I hate it." I think people just saw it and went, "Yeah, it was good," and just walked out. Which,
but here's the thing, right? First movie, Black Panther, a really exciting new character, a really exciting new world. We're exploring the sort of flaws and all these sort of things about, like, do you hide yourself from the world, or do you be out there loud and proud, even if it causes sort of the risk of taking on all this sort of danger from the wider world and all this kind of stuff. Second film is, well, we know all of this now, but there's been a big shake-up, a change in this world, and how do these people handle it? Are they going to grow from that? A lot of people already grew up to this point. What's the third film? The third film is, well, we've been through a major change. We've established everything. Everyone has grown as basically as far as they can grow. Where do we go now?
I know what the third film is. Third film is we need better representation. White Panther.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah, what about a white African man? Like, wouldn't that be great?
To move away from this fraught topic, is there a good third Marvel movie out of any of the franchises?
I mean, yeah, you said it. It's Thor.
Yeah, I guess.
Because they made 2 bad films. So then
Yeah.
the third one was good. And then the fourth one, as you say, it's got that improv problems. I still think it lands slightly better than the first 2.
Yeah.
Like, I think where the third was a skyrocket in terms of quality, the fourth film just ends up landing back in that, like, mediocre valley.
You know the odd thing that those two films have in common as well is a really excellent performance from a 1-episode villain.
Yeah.
Like, Christian Bale was great in that film, as is Jonathan Majors in this.
This is just it, right? Where if your hero can't keep, like, stealing the spotlight, if your hero isn't going to keep bringing people to the screen, what changes in every superhero film? Well, it is the villain. It is the threat. And the threat can't be an event, because the event isn't played by a captivating, amazing Hollywood, like, superstar actor who says their lines super cool and, like, makes people, like, drip from the eyeballs from their performance. So you just get actors that play, like, just award-winning, like, performances of villains. And the villains are complex as well, aren't they? Like, they've been through something. They represent something that, like, matters to them. It's grief, it's heartbreaking. Sometimes they want something so much that they're willing to do bad things to achieve that goal, and that goal in itself might actually be really, like, worth pursuing.
Yes.
And it's heartbreaking that this is the path that they took.
But the problem with Kang in this film is that he definitely does have that, but you don't know that unless you've seen Loki.
And they don't want to tell you much more because they want to use him later.
Exactly, right? So he spends the whole movie going, like, oh, you don't want to get rid of me because something way worse is going to come if you get rid of me. And they keep hinting at it. They keep saying, like, oh, believe me, there's way worse than me, and the horrible things I do are the only things that stop it. But then a character will challenge him on it, and he'll be like, fuck you, and just, like, attack him. He won't say fuck you, but, he'll attack him, kind of thing. But, like,
I was losing my mind. I was like, I think I've watched a Marvel film recently, but I can't remember what it is. Guardians 3. And we're not reviewing it, but that would be in the other section. But just as a thought,
is Guardians 3...
I liked Guardians 3 a lot.
Okay, because I have heard some people are like, still got it, and some people are like, don't got it no more.
I think it's something slightly different that it's got.
Okay. Well, that they have the advantage of that they are not a single character cast. So
yes.
So you have more characters that you can. It's not all about Peter Quill, But even that had that. The first film was like, these fucking great characters who all have their flaws, but they learn to get better. And then the second film is like, okay, they're all pretty good. We've had some, villain to hero arcs. We'll have a couple more, but we're running out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, Guardians 3 is good. I'll talk about it in the other section later. Jamie, are you ready to summarize Ant-Man, or is there anything else
I
you
think
want to say
so.
about it?
I think I got all. So,
Sorry.
Just to spoil it, I chose to review this movie because I saw the trailer for this movie and I saw MODOK, and I wrote all the MODOK jokes before I saw the film.
Oh, that is a special kind of venom, isn't it? That is a special kind of like. Before even eating at this restaurant, I had already prepared a number of criticisms against the dish I could see on its menu. I then went to eat at the restaurant just so I could rip the shit out of the menu later on, having had an actual meal experience there.
And I
can
have to
tell
say,
you,
I still
didn't
stand
change
by
my mind.
I still stand by everything I said. But I did write that before I saw the film.
You were like watching the film, and I'm like, I'm so validated. Oh, this is so. I'm gonna get to say all of this in the review. I love it. Imagine when they do a Cats, right, where they're actually gonna patch the film later on, and Modoc's gonna look, I don't know, better.
I
quote
don't
unquote.
think you can make him look better.
Yeah.
The only way you can make him look better is making him stop motion again.
Stop motion. Yeah. Okay. Right, Jamie, you are man. You are just like. You're a hero now. Everyone knows you're a hero. You've solved all your problems. Apparently, you've got a criminal daughter or something. Your whole family's back together. And you're just like, you're pretty cushy now that you've kind of established your regular working hours in the hero industry. And then all of a sudden, zoop wap wop, you are sucked into for no reason. Review Mania, this weird universe where, I mean, someone could have put effort a lot into the reviews around you, but they just didn't. But the worst of all, the real insult to this like journey that you've been forced to go on is this horrible, horrible one-line review of Ant-Man, The Wasp: Quantumania that they've like stretched over this weird CGI, like, I don't know, face, like this, like the you can see the pixels of the font. Like they didn't actually just increase the font with the resolution, but they like stretched the text of like a 6-font paragraph, wrapped it round like a horrible kind of cylinder sprite, and you're just forced to stare at this thing for the rest of your adventure as it kind of just offends your eyes. It's grammatically and syntactically like absolutely abhorrent. There's a particular member of our audience who is very strict about grammar, spelling, and language, who would be vomiting in his seat were he to see what I'm envisioning right now for this review summary. Jamie, you look at this thing, and the only way to get rid of it is to read it out loud. What is this one-line review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? What does it say?
Paul Rudd and Modoc's journey through the green street, oh, fuck me.
That's better. This is right.
Paul Rudd and Modoc's adventures through the green screen studio.
I like that Paul Rudd, the actor, is hanging out with MODOK, the character.
Yeah. Honestly,
all right, cool.
Just on that point, Paul Rudd plays Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like he phones it in.
Oh, he knows what he's making.
Everyone phones it in. Jonathan Majors is like, I turned up for a proper acting day, and everyone else is like, great. There's scenes where people talk to Jonathan Majors, and Jonathan Majors gives them the fucking performance of his lifetime, and they're like, no, you can't do that.
Everyone goes, cut. John Majors collapses to the floor,
and
having put 120% into his fucking line, and everyone else just fucking downs another pint and like goes to the pub.
Everyone else is just sort of chilling out, and they're like pumping Jonathan Majors full of adrenaline to keep him going, and everyone else is like, oh, he's ready? Okay, yeah. No.
All right, you want to go again, bud? You're doing a great job, buddy. No, when we said Paul Rudd knows exactly what he was making, my humorous response to that is it's in the end it's a 7-figure paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, are we allowed to move on?
Yeah, we can move on. Sorry, we can.
That's all right. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. All right. What, Jonas? What are you reviewing this month? That's what I do in this show. So
thanks for asking, buddy. The film I'm talking about is Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse. This is a sequel to the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which we reviewed in our first ever episode of the podcast on February 5th, 2019. An episode which was only live streamed and did not make it into an audio-only format. As such, this review will reference the previous film where necessary. Now, there are a few major distinctions between Spider-Verse, the Spider-Verse series of films, and the Spider-Man like MCU films that you may recognize that feature Tom Holland. And I bring this up, by the way, this is just an addendum to my review. I bring this up because when I mentioned Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse to at least 2 to 3 of my friends, they were like, oh, I didn't know there was a new Spider-Man film with Tom Holland. And they didn't know about Into the Spider-Verse. They didn't know it existed. They had not seen it or been aware of it, which I think is a fucking sin. So, yeah, just to be really clear, they're fucking different. So the Spider-Verse films are animated. That's key point number 1. The Spider-Verse films feature Miles Morales, who is played by Shamik Moore, not Peter Parker. Not Peter Parker.
Well,
And
they
3,
didn't feature him.
well, the main character is not Peter Parker. The main character is Miles Morales. Thank you. And 3, the Spider-Verse films have no relation to the MCU films. They do not take place in the same universe, the same timeline. There is no crossover series on Disney Plus that you have to watch in between these goddamn films. They are their own films. Now, I'm not going to recap the story of Into the Spider-Verse because I do think you should absolutely go see it. But I think if you even mildly enjoy superhero stories and you're tired of them being a bit samey, think about the review that we just did. I want you to go watch Into the Spider-Verse like right now. Like, I mean, maybe pause this audio version of the podcast and actually just go out of your way to watch Into the Spider-Verse. It is a completely different presentation of the genre, and it will reinvigorate you with a genuine love for like Marvel characters in the universe. It just will. Across the Spider-Verse, it picks up where its prequel left off, and the core plot of this film is that Miles is introduced to a dimension that houses hundreds, if not thousands, of spider people from across different dimensions, and they must work together to stop the destructions of all worlds. It's pretty standard stuff, to be honest. But where Across the Spider-Verse absolutely elevates itself above the regular old genre, and even its own prequel, is how it visually communicates with you. When I say this film is animated, that doesn't do it justice. The Spider-Verse films represent just a whole new gold standard for creative and diverse animation styles in a single film, especially at like the budget and marketing level of this film. Each dimension has its own distinctive rules, its own colors, its own frame rate, shapes, and style that sets it apart from like any of the other dimensions that the characters visit. The heroes keep their own visual design when they travel into new dimensions, so no matter how busy the screen gets with detail and chaos, the creativity and distinctiveness of the world makes it so easy to follow what's happening at any given moment. Now, naturally, there's a lot of fun to be had with the concept of like many spider people all existing in one place. They get to reference memes, they reference like other media, they pull in fun actors and guests to voice and play characters that you might not have been expecting. This is a Spider-Man film that just celebrates Spider-Man to the highest degree, and it manages to draw from so many inspirations to make jokes and references that no other franchise, I think, could do as smoothly. This is easily one of my favorite films of all time. I'm going to rewatch this film probably like at least once or twice more, just so I can like pay attention to the gorgeous details and like background things. There's just so much playful like cinematography, choreography, like action, like physical comedy, all this sort of stuff just gets executed and delivered to you so fucking fantastically. And it's got a great soundtrack, and the voice performances are just superb. This is a great film. So is its prequel. Go watch both. Jamie, have you watched Across the Spider-Verse?
No, not yet. I really want to. I really, really loved the previous film. It was, it's incredible, and everything you say, like it's an absolute masterpiece of animation, and it came out of nowhere as well. I remember when it was first announced that it felt really weird that we were in the middle of the Tom Holland sort of franchise at that point, and then they were like, oh, also there's this quirky Spider-Man animation, and everyone sort of said, oh, how does this fit in the MCU canon? They said, no, doesn't. It's just a thing that's happening. The studio's just doing this thing. It came out of nowhere. It was just incredible. And to this day, it's still a film that whenever anyone says, "I don't like superhero movies," I go, "Watch Spider-Verse." It genuinely, it's it's its own thing, and it's so creative and interesting. I guess the first thing is, could you watch the second movie without having seen the first movie?
In terms of like, so the threat that gets resolved in the first film ends up having like knock-on effects in the second film,
Right.
but you don't have to be familiar with it. Like, you don't have
Right.
to have seen it happen. That said, you really want to. The heart of this film is Miles and Gwen,
Mm.
and they're introduced in the first film, and their relationship is established in the first film. You should watch the first film before you watch this film.
No,
It is a direct sequel.
I agree, but there will be some people who sort of, they see something as on at the cinema, and like you said, a lot of people didn't know that the first film even came out, and it would be a shame if people end up seeing this and going, I don't get any of it. Like, it's beautiful, but I don't know what's going on. So it's nice to know that it is still palatable, even if it's just the only film you've watched. I mean, we keep talking about the fact that the MCU has gotten to the point where it's just unintelligible if you don't do primer reading. They have a fucking series on Disney Plus where you get caught up on different heroes just before their series starts. So it's kind of nice to have a movie that you can drop in and watch. Obviously, I'm not arguing that we should just, every movie should be its own independent thing where you could trash everything that came before it. But there is something brilliant about the first movie that wasn't necessarily just the plot. I mean, if I think about it now, I can't remember much of the plot. What I can remember is the visuals, really striking visuals throughout.
I think like the film does still do that, like, characters do really quick voiceovers to be like, hey, yo, it's me. Do you remember who I am? Here's a real quick highlight for you. I do this, I do this, I do this. Okay, now. So there is that little bit of element where it's like the characters in the film talk to you, the audience, with like a little bit of like exposition and narrative, but that's part of the flavor of the film, right? Like, it breaks the fourth wall. It's very comic booky. Some characters talk to you. Some characters talk to each other. Some characters have inner thoughts that gets voiced to you. So you hear like inner monologues and thoughts. And the entire film is always deciding what the best decision is at any time to give you the information you need, right, to enjoy this next moment. And there's no rules about what it considers right and wrong in that sphere. So that's like a lot of fun, right? Like, it just decides this would be effective, and it just does it always, both visually and narratively and in the audio and stuff like that. And yeah, once you push past the idea that like you may just not know a lot of like the emotional context for these characters, most of the plot is self-contained. Like, it is, everyone says exactly what they're like. Everyone says what the threat is. Everyone says who they are if you've not met them before. And the concept of like the Spider-Verse, it gets briefly touched on really early on, and then it gets hugely expanded in this film. So that's all gonna be just fine.
I'm hoping that this film this series stays self-contained. I'm hoping that we don't have any spin-offs and things like that. This is a sentence that probably like a decade ago me, when I was first sort of hearing about sort of, I don't know if it's a decade ago, but a long time ago me first hearing about the MCU stuff and being like, oh, they're going to connect. I was like, that sounds amazing. Now I'm like, oh, God, I just hope this stays Spider-Verse and they don't make any spin-offs and anything like that.
Stay in your fucking lane.
Do you feel like it's headed that way, or do you feel like they have a good grasp on what they're doing?
They're making a third film, definitely.
Yeah.
That's announced and known, and it's. I went into this film not remembering that they announced 2 sequels.
They announced 2 sequels.
As in.
Oh, I see.
Before this film came out, they were like, we're making 2 more films. So eventually this will be a trilogy. I was about to call it a trilogy, whatever. A trilogy. Going into this film, just be aware that when it ends, it won't be over, because it explicitly feeds into its next film, as in it's a 2-parter. Like, where Into the Spider-Verse is like a nice, gentle introduction, where they weren't. I don't think they would have been confident that they'd get a second or third film.
Yeah.
This film is a two-parter, yes, and we don't know what part. We haven't seen part 2 yet. We don't know much about it, but it is definitely happening.
Does it feel like a first half, or does it feel like its own complete thing?
It felt like its own complete thing until the last 15 minutes, where I sat staring at the screen, going, I don't know how they're going to satisfyingly resolve everything in the next 15 minutes. This is going to be like a really rushed ending. This feels really weird. And then when it ended, it was like, to be continued. And I was like,
Right.
oh my God, I forgot there's another film. Fuck. But I was quite annoyed because I was
Yeah.
like, fuck, it doesn't end. It
Yeah.
doesn't end here in this chair right now. It ends in 3 years when I
Yeah.
come back.
No, it's next year apparently. It comes
Okay.
out. So yeah.
But what I am glad about is it means I'm going to get to spend another 90 to 120 plus minutes in that world with those characters, with that art style. And it's so fucking good to be sat in a chair watching this film always.
It's exactly the same feeling I had at the end of June, where I was like, wait, this feels a bit like it's wrapping up, but they can't be wrapping. Oh my God, no! Yeah, but
yeah.
cool. Well,
So
yeah,
super hype.
I don't want to talk much more about it because I think that it's clear your sort of, you know, your enthusiasm for it, and I cannot wait to see it. I don't know if I'm going to get to see it in the cinema, but I really do want to see it.
I'm incredibly enthusiastic about it, and I'm not talking to you about plot elements at all, because this film is clever enough to like not wear a lot of it on its sleeve. You know what I mean? Like there's more going on than the trailers want you to know, and good films do that with their trailers, you know. So yeah.
But you know, more than anything, I just visually the first one was so good, and you know, even if I have all the plot spoiled, just being able to sit and experience the view of it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and just the Spider-Men that they introduce in this film are great. Just huge shout out to the fact that they bring in like Punk Spider-Man and who that man is, like who he is under the mask, the country that he's from, the voice that he has, the style that he has. All of it is really good. Like it's so well done. I found it grating at first, and then I adored it by the end of the film. And I'm like, yeah, I want more of this character in my life.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you are a Spider-Man, and you've had your original Spider-Man movie where you found out that there's different Spider-Man out there of different Spider-Verses, and everything gets wrapped up quite nicely in the first movie, but in the second one, the Spider-Verse gets broken up again, and you realize that the only way to solve it this time is to bring together the fractured shards of a one-sentence review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And you thwip and you thwop your way across the Spider-Verse, meeting lots of colourful characters. You meet the Guardian review Spider-Man, and you meet like alternate podcasts review Spider-Man,
Sure.
and all of these various colourful characters. But eventually you manage to bring all the parts together. And the final part of the movie is you reading this one-sentence review. And it says...
I would say it's only the beginning, but it's not. And it's going to get better.
And then you feel a wave of gratification over you for having completed this task. And then you realize, oh, this was pointless, and it didn't actually solve any of the problems in your life. And thus the third movie begins in 2024. All right, we've got that's the end of the movie section. Actually, before we move on to the others bit, and before we move on, I remembered another good third Marvel movie, which is the third Spider-Man movie. Was pretty good. I thought the one where all the other Spider-Men appear. That was pretty good.
Oh, I mean, yeah. The Spider-Man films have been like pretty like not offensive. You know what I mean? Like they've either been straight up very enjoyable, or they've been like, yeah, that kept me going.
Not to make this a super long review of another Spider-Man movie, but I think part of the reason the Spider-Man movies work is that Tom Holland really wants to be there. And
Yeah,
I
very
feel
true.
like none of the other MCU actors want to be there anymore.
You might be right, and like, I don't know. I know that like all the new Marvels are coming out, and maybe that will inject like a new energy into it or something. Like the superheroes who haven't really had a film yet, or like have had like a small series, and they want their chance to be on the big screen. But yeah, again, everyone's gonna fall into the same like fallacy, or everyone's gonna hit the same dead end, and you know the content, the people writing and designing this content need to make decisions early on about where those shows are going before they hit those dead ends, because yeah,
I just don't want Tom Holland to get old and jaded. He needs to stay young and youthful and energetic forever.
you can't save him forever.
All right, you've put down My Father's Dragon.
Yeah, so this is when we thought we were doing the podcast on Tuesday, the original Tuesday, and I needed a film to watch on short heckin' notice. Mary said, "There's a film I really want to watch, and I want to watch it with you, and it's called My Father's Dragon." I went, "Okay, cool. I really just need to be forced to watch a film, so just sit me down and let's watch it." My Father's Dragon is a relatively recent film, 2022 on Netflix. It's an animated film. It is aimed at a young audience, right? It is like a very like family friendly, moral, lots of things to learn from kind of tale about a boy who is forced to move out of his small village and into the big city with his mum. They have very little money. They're really struggling. He really doesn't like this new way of life. And so to try and change his fortune, he wants a big adventure. And he gets told about a dragon. And he gets told about, he's told basically, go to this island, you'll be able to meet a dragon. And if you meet this dragon, all your problems are going to be solved. And so the adventure is this boy going to this island and finding this dragon and kind of saving its life. And then actually discovering the dragon's like not everything he thought it was going to be. The dragon ends up being really young and immature himself. The problems that there are problems on this island that are like complex, and neither of these two characters are really equipped to deal with, at least not alone. But together they might be able to figure it out. And that's kind of like the film generally. It's that it's like largely going to be quite like a family friendly like feel good film, but it has some like genuine heart, and it has like the issues are complex and they're presented in such a way that it's like you kind of don't really know like how people are going to resolve these issues, because they're quite complex, they're quite serious. People's lives are people's lives are on the line, and people have to make sacrifices to get the things that they want. And the boy has to learn that like it's not enough to just like say that you have the answer to everything, because that's what he does for like the whole film, is he just keeps pretending like he alone can solve all these problems. And yeah, it had a lot of heart and a lot of love, and it was like quite a beautiful film. Like it genuinely had like a lot of like stunning artistry and lovely moments. It's nice. I don't think it's the kind of thing that I would really say that anyone of like my friendship group needs to watch. I wouldn't really sort of say that this is a film for me or my age group. But I could understand that if you wanted to entertain a young one, or if you just wanted something that like really pulled at those like younger heartstrings of yours, My Father's Dragon would be a perfectly good watch for doing that. Yeah.
It looks pretty. I just Google image searched it, and it has a pretty style of animation. It's based on a novel, apparently. So
yeah,
it's nice.
It's I know it's sort of by the same team who did Wolf Walkers, who, if I haven't reviewed that on this podcast before, Wolf Walkers, I think I might have talked about it briefly, but I believe that's like an award-winning animation from I think it might be an Irish studio, an Irish team. It's a very Irish story. I can't quite remember the origins of all these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like, it's very accessible, it's very lovely, it's very pretty. That's
Cool.
Yeah, My Father's Dragon.
All right, we're going to move on to our final section of the podcast, which is everyone's favorite section of the podcast. It's the roulette, the Netflix roulette. And usually it's everyone's favorite part of the podcast, because it's the part of the podcast where we have to talk about something that we absolutely hated. and everyone always enjoys watching us suffer, but not this month. I don't think. Not this month. This month we watched a movie called DTC Yukemuri Junjou Hen from High and Low. And it is a movie where you follow 3 characters, Dan, Tetsu, and Chiharu, who are biker boys and former gang members, maybe, who they decide after maybe years of fighting that they are finally done, and they're going to have a holiday, they're going to have a road trip and there's going to be no fights at all. And so they all get on their motorbikes and they go on a road trip. And partway through their trip, they run out of money. And they decide that they're going to try and find work at a local hot spring. And when they arrive at the hot spring, they find that it is run by a beautiful woman who is in love with the man who helps her manage the hot spring. And he is in love with her. But they can't say it to each other because of her daughter from her previous dead husband. And so the boys make it their mission to try and get them together. It is... I quite enjoyed it. I expected you to have enjoyed it. Jonas, how did you feel about it?
Why did you expect me to enjoy it? Because is it because it's full of Japanese tropes?
Yeah, basically, it feels like an anime, right? It definitely has these sort of like, it has a lot of overacting. It has a lot of sort of like, it flashes back to various sort of dramatic fight scenes, and it just sort of has that feel of a good sort of the good part, the things I like about anime when I see them. It definitely had that sort of energy that it was sort of an animated energy to a real life, movie. The sort of like the scenes where they perform with the Recorder Brothers, these two men who are like friends who decide to start a band called the Recorder Brothers. Where they'll travel around playing recorders, but that one of them's rich dad basically heard that they were starting a band and booked them a countrywide tour, even though they'd never played before. And so they basically have to do the tour and work out what the act is as they go. And there's this scene where they perform one of their songs, which is about being a nice person and all the nice things that you should do and like how you should be a nice person. And it's just really wacky. And they've got this really wacky dance. Like all of that I felt would appeal to you.
So the thing is a lot of those elements that you just said, not very anime at all. Anime never spontaneously busts out like musical dance numbers, right? Like that just doesn't happen. What you normally get is like, a scene of 2 people like having a cool fight and using power-ups, or using the power of friendship to get back up after a near lethal wound, and you're like meant to be crying because they're like trying so hard and it's so emotional. And so going into this, I knew that like this is a franchise where this like boy band have like a biker gang. And I think this is what we researched like the end of last podcast, was we learned that like, oh, this is a series of films about them like being a biker gang and fighting different gangs. Okay, cool. I'm watching an anime, or recently watched an anime about biker gangs in Tokyo, and how their small gang fights bigger gangs, and these epic fights always end up with them either befriending the enemy gang, or the enemy gang getting dissolved into them and like becoming allies. And so this film starts, and it's really well established. Like it clearly establishes that, man, these boys, they've been on some adventures, haven't they? Like, guys, don't you remember that time that we fought? We fought Sword, and we fought the Babaharu brothers and things. And you're right, it flashes back to those epic moments. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is like going to be like season 7 of that like anime show where like all the friendships are established. And then what this actually is it's more like that kind of like feely good beach episode that you get in anime, where the characters step away from the action, and anyone who was a villain or an antagonist or a source of friction previously in the story shows up. They're on holiday as well, So everyone stays neutral. Everyone's friends. This is Switzerland here, you know? This is like when Ash and Team Rocket have those rare moments where they're not actually antagonistic against each other because Team Rocket aren't trying to steal Pikachu and Ash isn't trying to like save a crisis. And it just had a lot of what it had, but really surprised me was like way more emotional depth and heart than I thought a very anime inspired biker gang action series was going to have. So just in all those ways, this was so unlike any anime like series I've seen up until this point, and I fucking loved it.
But so this is the thing is I think that, and you're saying that like this is like the beach episode, and I think that's exactly it, right? So I did a bit of research afterwards after we watched it on the main show, and basically the show is about an area that was so contested by gangs that it became named for an acronym for the 5 main gangs, which became SWORD. Right, so that's when they talk about SWORD, they're talking about the area they're in, right? And the main show is basically all combat, right? It's all anime fighting combat kind of thing. And DTC, those characters, they were part of one of the main gangs, the S part of this main gang, main series, right? They spend the whole show is them beating the shit out of each other. And this is the beach episode. This is the comedy episode, right? This is the moment where, like, everyone who's watched High and Low are expecting anime fight scenes, and this is 3 lads on a bike trying to help someone find love. But it still has all of those sensibilities. Everything is quite over the top, right? People are quite big and broad in the way they act, in the way they talk, kind of thing. They definitely have that sort of like, you know, the intensity with which they would do a fight scene in a normal one, they do finding love in this one, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's that's what sort of the feeling I got. And when I that feeling I got from it, basically, I thought this is exactly the kind of shit that appeals to Jonas, right?
It's I think it's like it's very much how like Japan does comedy as well. It's like where we do comedy more with like wit and language and wordplay and like this is a funny scenario, isn't it? Japan does it with a bit more aplomb, with a bit more like slapstick, with a little bit more kind of like, you know,
it's energy,
over,
it's excitement,
energy, but like facial expressions,
it's
like
clowning. It's like
like clowning definitely, I think, like enforces a huge amount of like their comedy delivery, and it probably doesn't. Like, it probably doesn't really. It's probably well informed by the fact that this film is like directly following over the top hype action like Japan series, right? Like if the previous films had been really grounded and stoic and the combat had been incredibly like one person gets shot and they fall to the ground and it's 5 minutes of crying that person as they bleed out, that would be far more traumatic and like, oh my god, that's really down to earth and like sad and dark. Then maybe this film wouldn't have that energy. Maybe it would be more a straight-laced like rom-com. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I for the first 30 minutes, I was a bit cringy, like a bit like the teenage humor was a little bit like Boys Will Be Boys, you know, with them like lusting after girls and just like really caring about how they were like presented in like that charismatic sense, that they really wanted to be pretty and liked.
But even then, there wasn't that much of that. They don't. They like the scene where they consider joining the Recorder Brothers, and then they're like, "What are we talking about? No, of course we're not going to." But
yeah, I did find that funny. Like I think there was a lot of humor in the beginning, but I thought the whole film was going to be that, like just the slapstick humor.
Yeah,
and when the romantic element started appearing, right, you know, you see this beautiful lady who owns the inn, and one of the boys instantly finds her beautiful and captivating, and you know is like, my god, the perfect woman. And instantly, like, it doesn't take long for the story to establish, no, this isn't a romance about the 3 characters anymore. This is about the 3 main characters enabling another romance. They become supporters of that romance. They become problem solvers of this other romance that this show has introduced. The main characters don't try and usurp the romance. He doesn't try and make himself a challenger to the love interest. And that's where I really started to respect it. I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This is good. I like this. Like it ended up, there's a moment where a character is like trying to talk to a kid, and he's been a bit like silly up until this point. And the kid's sort of, her dad's died and she's being raised by a single mum, and she has to like deal with the implications of a new father. And for this kind of like slapstick comedy butt of the joke man to stand there and say, I was raised by a single mother too, and let me tell you a little bit about how that makes me feel. And I just found that like really endearing. And also, I recently had a conversation with a woman who's just become a single mother, and I spoke to her for quite a long time about being a boy who had been raised by a single mother. And so I just found that like really endearing and like engaging in such a like wholesome and lovely way. When 10 minutes ago the boys were doing a Sylvia Peppier scene about the complex love diagram happening in this hotel.
It's funny because our opinion on it was we liked it, and we liked all that end stuff as well. But our opinion was that the beginning was better. That it started quite energetic, it started quite funny, it started quite sort of slapstick and over the top, and then they were like, okay, now we're gonna solve this problem, and we were like, it lost a lot of the energy that we quite liked about it, that was sort of pushing us through it. That's not to say we didn't like it. Like, it definitely really felt like a lot of the the heartfelt stuff was really well written, right? Like the way that Dan interacts with the daughter Megumi and all that kind of stuff was really good. But we were really enjoying their sort of like goofiness, like the scene in the karaoke bar where the guy has the amazing voice, and they're singing a song about like a woman cheating on her husband, and there's a part in the song where the husband comes home, and the owner of the bar, who has this amazing voice, is like having a conversation with Tetsu and Chiharu, and then Dan gets to that point in the song and he goes, "Excuse me," and he walks over and pretends to be a jilted lover, like shouting at the couple. It's just really good.
Yeah, no, and I think that guy's like a famous voice actor who
he had a really good voice.
must be like present in other stuff. That scene was really fucking funny.
Yeah.
But still, like, the weird story element of like, let's get these biker gangs to hire out an entire bar, and then they're all going to play people who work in the bar, and let's get this other biker gang to bring in the production value, like the stage value for a genuine musical number, and then let's use this musical number to get two people to hook up.
So there is a part to this as well, which is that, so I realized through this and through a bit of the research that there is more to it. There is these elements that these gangs are known for certain things, which is why they're in the show, right? So one of the gangs talks about how like they're good with fashion, and they have all these girls who like them, and that's why they're brought in. But it's like offhandedly mentioned because you're supposed to already know who these people are. Yeah. So when they turn up, I guess for people who are fans of this, it doesn't feel so weird. But for us, it's like, what? Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, because there's a bit where they walk up the stairs to the first hot spring, and then a character pops their head out from a corner and goes, "I just heard a really familiar voice. Oh well, let's set up this stall."
Yeah.
And what happened to me was I was like, okay, so they're from a previous film. They're clearly another gang. The question
not
is,
established in any way.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so are they going to fight? Are they going to turn out to be allies? Like how are they going to feed in like as an obstacle in this story? And then they weren't an obstacle. They were just brought in as guest stars to like, they're going to solve this problem. Remember them, audience? And I'm like, no, I don't. But thanks.
My last couple of notes on this film are the joke at the end with DPD made no sense. I presume it's something to do with the show.
So the thing is even like when they give you the language in the subtitle, the two words that are Japanese don't clearly translate to anything obvious. Like they're just, sometimes I can visually look at a Japanese word and I can break it down. Yeah. I looked at those phrases and went, that's nonsense. That is actual Like the characters may appreciate that there's a reference, like maybe someone they know is the first D and someone else who died is the second D or something. I don't know. Nonsense.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense. And earlier on in the movie, they make a joke about someone's name, and the translator. So when they're eating pot noodles, they make a joke about how someone's name sounds like something, and the translator effectively went, "Fuck, I don't know," and so just didn't bother translating it. So they all laugh, and it makes no sense at all. And I guess it was just like basically untranslatable in a short enough time for it to make sense in the scene. But they're just like,
Maybe.
huh, it's really funny how his name sounds like this like pot noodle thing. It's like, is it? What does that mean?
Oh, is it when they're trying to do kari, and they
Something
like
like
try and
that.
swap the
Yeah.
K and the C?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of just went, okay, whatever. That
It-
they're having fun.
We found it quite funny that basically like there's because various things are translated. So they have like the traffic lights early on, and even
Yeah.
though they say Mr. Blue and he's wearing a blue shirt because Japanese traffic lights are said to be blue, the translation at one point when they're actually talking about traffic lights is red, yellow, green because they know
Sure.
that the rest of the world calls it green. So they do culturally translate things, and then that scene they just went, "Fuck, I don't know."
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice they were not wearing like red, yellow, green, but calling it traffic lights. And I was like, I've been to Tokyo and I didn't perceive the lights as green, but then whatever, are blue.
So this will be the last aside, and then we'll move on. I googled this.
I want to make a last aside, but carry on.
Okay, you can have a last side after I have a last side. I googled this. Japanese traffic lights are mostly green. Some are blue, but they're mostly green. And someone who knows Japanese better than me is going to say, you got this completely wrong. But basically, the word for blue means kind of blue or green, but mostly blue.
Aoi, I
Yeah,
believe.
exactly,
A-O-I,
right?
Aoi.
So when they talk about the green traffic lights, they are green, but the word for them is a word that's mostly used for blue. Because the word for green is like analogous, basically. It means like leafy green and things like that. So you wouldn't say they're green, you'd say they're blue/green, but mainly blue, even though they are green.
Right.
And that's why he wears a blue shirt.
I'm trying to think. Green is like Midori or something like that.
Yeah.
But then
But
I could be.
that's an analogy for like trees and leafy green stuff. Which
Sure.
doesn't apply
So
to those things.
it expounds from something else and isn't actually just a color sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
What was your aside?
My aside is the ending to this film made me cry.
Aw.
I was like kind of just enjoying it, and then I was like, oh, okay, this like emotional like story towards the end with Megumi like having to learn to like accept that her father is never going to change and accept that like a new partner to her mother does not necessarily mean a replacement for her father. Like I found all that like very emotional and nice. And then there's the moment where the would-be husband steps forward with the ring, and he steps up to the woman that he's going to propose to, and she steps aside, and it's Megumi. And obviously, like if you didn't have the context for this, you'd be like, "Oh my god, he's about to propose to a little girl." But no, you do know the context for this. You know that what this is it's not emotionally important for him to propose to the woman, that they know they love each other, right? That's like well established at this point. He needs to form a relationship with this girl. He doesn't have a positive relationship with this girl, and that's what the entire like plot has been hinging on, is for them to bridge this disconnect. And it's the moment he steps forward and he gets on a knee and he says, "Will you be my daughter?" And I just fucking click bold, like 100% sold emotionally on this film. I thought that was such a clean, like emotional, like delivery. I found the rest of that scene to just be really touching. I found her reaction to the question just incredibly moving.
The little girl is a really good actress.
Yeah, she was good, wasn't she? Yeah, absolutely. Like not one of those just child actors where you're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They're just being given like instructions. Like,
She genuinely reacts to things in a way that you're like, oh yeah, she looks like she's feeling that thing.
yeah, and just so in the end, like where I was ready to be a little bit like, mid positive on this film. That ending just completely like locked me in to I like this film. I like this film. Like I really like this film. What's weird though
I did
is if I
too.
watch the others, they're not gonna have that same feeling.
They might do. You never know.
I don't know. I saw some of the clips of 20 guys charging into a group of 50 guys with weapons and uniforms and thought it's less emotionally moving. It is hype. I will enjoy it on that sense.
Just in the background, there's going to be someone sort of having
It's a
an
little
emotional
girl
moment
crying,
with
and I'm there crying with them.
All right. Well, from our tiny oasis of good movies from the randomizer, we must dip our hand back into the deep darkness that is next month's movie. Jonas, are you ready?
I don't want to move. I don't want to leave this film.
You're going to
You know
have
what
to,
I mean?
I'm afraid. I'm tearing you away.
Don't pull me away.
This is next month's movie. I'm holding it up to the camera, but we're not going to start with this. We're going to go through the ones we could have had. Oh, I just saw the word Paul Rudd. So we could have had
Paul Rudd.
Sausage Party, which most
God,
people know what that is.
funny.
But for those who don't, it's a raunchy comedy
silly,
with Michael Cera, James Franco, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, and Paul Rudd. And what it doesn't say on here is it's a 3D animation, and was sort of famously bad, I think. We could have had Enclave, a Serbian film about a 10-year-old boy in post-war Kosovo, described by Wikipedia as a propaganda drama. Well, okay.
Okay, you know when Wikipedia says it's a propaganda drama that it's got to be good.
Yeah. We could have had One Who Set Forth, Wim Wenders' Early Years, a documentary about Wim Wenders, the German film director.
Okay.
We could have had Oil on Canvas, a Spanish LGBTQ drama / comedy. We could have had Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond. Jim Carrey performs as Andy Kaufman and reflects on his life. That's 4 stars. I would have happily watched a Jim Carrey movie.
It's 4 out of 10, I guess, right? IMDb.
No, 4 out of 5, I think these ones are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Spokeswoman, a Mexican documentary about the first indigenous woman to run for president of Mexico.
Okay.
We could have had...
We could have done a lot of factual learning, it sounds like.
Yeah. We could have had To Russia with Love. Not From Russia with Love, the James Bond film, but To Russia with Love, a Filipino rom-com.
It's the same film, but in reverse.
Yeah, yeah. And in Filipino. But we are going to be watching Super Senior Heroes, an Indian Tamil comedy, drama, action, adventure. We're back to Indian cinema, pals.
Yeah, we haven't had one in a while, have we?
We haven't had one in a while. No,
It's recent.
You know what? I'm looking forward to it. It does have 2 out of 5 stars here. Super Senior Heroes. Let's have a look, shall we?
5.5 out of 10
on IMDb. Well,
it's a 2022 film.
Okay. So, 65-year-old Ganeshan has completely lost the zest for life after his wife's passing. But the news of his 7-year-old grandson Adeth's visit to India gives him a new lease on life. When all attempts to bond with the superhero fanatic Adith fail, Ganeshan and his retired friends join in the madness of pretending to be a superhero league. Okay. So they're a bunch of seniors who get together to pretend to be superheroes.
My grandson doesn't like me. Let me dress up.
The thumbnail still for the trailer looks fucking bonkers.
What, the group of them all walking towards?
Yeah. One of them looks like Saddam Hussein. One of them looks like Lincoln.
I mean, it's diverse. It's a diverse costuming choice.
Yeah. All right.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, all right. I guess we're gonna go with we're gonna have to go with this then. So Super Senior Heroes, that's what we'll be watching for next month. And a little bit of housekeeping because of the 24-hour podcast. Next month's podcast will be delayed, and it will actually be delayed by 2 weeks. So it will be on the third Tuesday of the month. So pop that in your calendars for next month's one, where we will be watching, or we will be talking about Super Senior Heroes. And for those of you who are here right now, or I don't know when this audio podcast is going to come out, but it might come out before the 24-hour podcast.
It definitely will.
Okay,
Definitely will.
excellent. Well, then join us live on the 1st of July from 3 p.m. for 24 whole hours, where Jonas and I will be doing a live 24-hour podcast. It's not going to be all reviewing things. It's going to be loads of stuff. We've got loads of fantastic guests. We're going to be, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be tweeting out about the guests. And probably at the end of this week, we'll be tweeting out the full schedule for the whole show so you can see what's going on. And we'll also be tweeting about the charity we're going to be supporting, which is POTS UK. But as I've been teasing out little segments that are going to be in all of the various, in the things throughout the various streams we've been doing recently, what I'll do is I'll tease out a couple of segments that are going to be in the 24-hour podcast. Namely, we're bringing a couple of segments from the main actual podcast to the 24-hour podcast. So not only will you have a rewind segment in which Jonas and I will be picking something from that the other person has reviewed without telling them, watching/playing it, and then coming in to rewind something from their history of reviews. But also, we have an extra special 24-hour podcast randomizer film. Jonas and I have been given a film we must watch before the 24-hour podcast. And we're not going to tell you what it is. You'll find out on the day what it is. But what I asked Laura to do when she picked out this film was not the normal thing where we just get a completely random film, but instead that she was to go through and pick out something that looked particularly awful. So hopefully, depending on how obvious it was that it was awful, we should have something pretty spectacular to talk about on. It's not Sausage Party, no, but we should hopefully have some.
Imagine if we had to watch Sausage Party twice for 2 different
Back
podcast
to back.
episodes.
Double Sausage Party. No, we will not. We will not be talking about Sausage Party, but it'll be something else. So tune in for that on the 1st of July from 3 p.m. all the way through to 3 p.m. the next day. You've gone really blurry there, Jonas, for some reason.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're all back now. Cool. All right. Well, so we will. That's it. I guess we should do the normal wrap up stuff, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Jonas, where can they find us on audio?
You can find us down the side of your sofa. You can find us on the third shelf to the right when you enter the kitchen. Probably on Spotify. I don't actually know a lot of podcast platforming services because I only use one myself. But believe me, if you've ever listened to a podcast somewhere, we're probably right next to that other podcast you've listened to. Like, just look a little bit to the left, look a little bit to the right. We're right there. Honestly, you can find us most places by searching Bunyip, the Bunyip Review. I think searching our names sometimes work as well, which makes me feel like a celebrity on Spotify. Yeah, you can find us quite easily, and chances are you know that as well. But you know what? You know who doesn't know how to find us? It's your friends and family who haven't actually listened to an episode before. So help them out, okay? They don't know what they're looking for until you've given it to them. So give them the Bunyip Review.
And if you do listen to us on audio stuff, or even if you listen to us in the video version, please review us wherever you can. That really helps. That gets the word out. That lets people know that we're good.
Start a review podcast where you review this podcast, and get way more popular than us. But do make it so that people want to come check out this podcast so they can get the context of what you're reviewing. That'd be really good.
I like the idea of a podcast called After the Bunyip, where it's like those TV shows after Big Brother or like Dancing with the Stars or whatever, where they talk about the show that just happened.
The phrase came to me post Bunyip clarity.
Yeah, name your podcast post Bunyip clarity.
Post Bunyip clarity. I've just listened to the Bunyip review, and my mind is clear. Oh my god, I've got so many thoughts.
I know it's never going to happen, but it would make my life if someone did a podcast reviewing our podcast every episode. And if you are listening to the audio version and you want to see our beautiful faces, or see, for example, my cat wander across the table at various points, you can tune in usually on the first Tuesday of every month, where we do the live stream recording, which then becomes the audio version of the podcast. And also there's some bonus bits where we chat to chat and all that kind of stuff. But as we said, next month in July, it will be on the third Tuesday of the month, assuming nothing changes. But you can find us at the Bunyip Review on Twitter, where we post all updates on things, schedule changes, and all that kind of jazz. Is that everything?
Yeah, I did some streaming while you were away, by the way.
Cool.
I just thought if you wanted to ask me if I'm doing any streaming, 'cause sometimes you ask me.
I do. I normally do after we finish recording the podcast.
Oh,
but I can ask you now if you like. Jonas, have you been doing any streaming?
Well, I just figured you mentioned you streaming the podcast, so maybe I don't do much streaming. Equality.
I normally mention the actual game streams after the podcast ends.
Maybe you do. I don't remember.
I do, but you can talk about it.
Okay. Well, I'm Jonas. You can find me online at JTTG. Those are my initials, in case you wonder why I do that. And yeah, obviously, if you ever want to talk to me and where I retweet podcast stuff, that's on Twitter. And if you want to see the fact that sometimes I do a cheeky stream, like I did with the Final Fantasy 16 demo, which I'm definitely going to be talking about next month, and Corpo Nation, which I mentioned earlier today, then you can find that on Twitch. JTTG. There you go. That's me.
Alrighty. Do you have a recommend before we go?
I do. It's such a silly thing. So we don't talk about news like in this podcast anymore. You know that we used to, and we did a little news sideshow, but we're very busy people. So I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. But Summer Games Fest happened, where a bunch of different companies kind of did their showcases and trailers for different games that are going to be coming out like over the next probably 2 to 3 years. And one of those trailers was for a game that really interests me called Metaphor Re-Fantasio. That is a title that I don't ever remember. It won't stay in my head, and fuck you, I refuse to remember it. But holy shit, the game looks great because it's made by the people who made Persona 5, which just has legendarily good UI, like great menus, great ways of interacting with the screen, and really great ways of communicating information to the player. This game, Metaphor Refantasio, is them taking like all that great UI elements and just turning it into like not a Persona game, like a game that's very much the same in terms of its design, but it's rather than Japanese high school kids saving the world, it looks like it's a weird fantasy, like biblical Pope angels, like European kind of style to it. It just looks very different. And the trailer just like makes me very excited because that game just has some really cool visual elements from the trailer alone. And I can't wait to actually see that like in practice. If you like video games in general, check out the other trailers from Summer Games Fest. I think Prince of Persia looks really good. And there are loads of indie games at the Day in the Dev show, which was presented by Tim Schafer from Double Fine, who were the subject of the documentary I reviewed last month. So look, it all comes back around, doesn't it? Lots of good stuff in the future.
And my recommendation is Knickknacks. They're really good.
Not sponsored.
Night, everyone.
Night.
Cool. That's the end of the podcast. Thank you for joining us, everybody. This was really good fun. Little late night Sunday streaming, podcasting. So streams for this week are there's not one on Tuesday because we have booked in a production meeting for the 24-hour podcast on the Tuesday.
Which we have.
Yes. At 9 p.m. apparently.
Yeah, because I'm working up until 8:30.
Of course, yes. All right. So there'll be no stream on Tuesday, but there should be one on Wednesday and Thursday, unless something goes horribly wrong. So tune in for those. And then it's only 2 weeks till 24-hour podcast.
Till the dreaded 24-hour podcast.
Till Pod Down. So then please join us for that. We're going to be tweeting about like all the guests and all that kind of stuff over the next couple of weeks, which will be really exciting. I think tomorrow we'll start with tomorrow effectively we're going to start by announcing myself and Jonas. But then after that there'll be people that you don't know are joining us yet.
Jamie, I can't believe you told them that we're going to be in that stream. I wanted to keep that secret.
Jonas, are you streaming it all this week?
Let me just take my inhaler.
This is the quality content you tune in for.
My lungs have been really bad for like the last 45 minutes. I've been trying to breathe really carefully to like.
Oh shit! You could have taken. I'll allow you in future. I'll allow you to take inhalers.
It just would have been a pain for me to roll and get the bag and pull it out.
I'd rather just
like,
die.
Well, it clearly hasn't been bad enough, right? Like I've just been managing it through like careful breaths. No, I've got this. I've got like a second job for 2 weeks. So Monday, actually, no, fuck off. I'm booked Thursday, Friday off work. Final Fantasy 16 comes out. That's why I booked the days off work. I might stream Final Fantasy 16 when I because I'm on holiday. But it won't be in the evening. It'll be daytime. So if you're working and you just like want some cheeky Jonas Final Fantasy excitement in your ears, I might do that. I might just stream my PlayStation feed straight to the PC and play it. It also really depends on how hot it is, because a PlayStation 5 and a desktop PC and 2 monitors and a webcam and a microphone and all of the heat output that the body does while you are streaming, because believe me, the body gets twice as fucking hot when you're streaming. It just does. Maybe I won't stream if that's the case. Maybe I just won't. We'll see.
Cool. Well, we'll keep an eye on socials and all that jazz. I'm sure I'll retweet when you tweet about it. But you got a bigger tweet following than me, so there. Cool. All right. I'm tired and hot. I'm gonna go melt in another room. But yeah. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll catch you Wednesday now. Bye.
Good night, everyone.